this meeting to order. Welcome to everybody. Nice to see you all. Nice to see all the staff over there. My goodness. So let's have a roll call.
We will have Youth Commissioner Omar Sanchez.
Here.
Victoria Leonard. Here. John Blackham.
Here.
Sean Gill.
Here.
Jerry Burke is absent. Richard Giesmer.
Here.
Susan Olmstead Bowen is absent, and Yvonne Scholl is absent. Councilmember Hannah.
Here.
Councilmember Grummeyer. Here. Councilmember Allman. Here. Mayor Pro Tem Newton.
Here.
Mayor Bash.
Here.
All present, thank you.
So I guess we will call upon the communications manager, Newton, to begin this.
Hi everybody, thanks for coming. Our city manager is going to give a brief introduction today. Hi everybody, so we come out, so really briefly, so workshop number 2 of 3 and with council and the committee, so thank you for being together today. So coming, just as a background, as a reminder, so coming out of last year's budget session, we had discussions about how are we using Measure R, how should we use Measure R, what are the appropriate times to use or not use Measure R. The council has suggested, we want to be able to spend some time with the commission, sit down with them, talk through these issues with them, and have the conversation. So this is that series of what we're doing. So this is workshop number 2. We've set you intentionally in this kind of unusual way so that you can have that conversation today. So really thankful for Kelly for putting together the program today to kind of facilitate your conversation. So with that, why put in place? Turn over to Kelly. Cool. So in workshop number 1, we discussed the system of financial government, right? So how a large percentage of the taxes that are generated in Norco go to the state rather than the city of Norco. That was the summary of workshop number 1. So in workshop number 2, we're going to discuss the origins and intended uses of Measure R. Some committee members are new, some have been here since the beginning, and so the purpose of this is to just get everyone kind of on the same page, using the same terminology, same definitions as we're talking about Measure R. So this is going to be more of a facilitated discussion that allows the council members and the committee members to exchange ideas together and determine that common set of facts and values as we move forward. So we are going to start with an icebreaker today. As everyone knows, Measure R was approved in 2018. So in that spirit, we would like to go around the room. We're going to introduce ourselves, since some of us may not even know each other, state our occupation, and then a significant memory that we have from 2018. So my name is Kelly Newton. I'm the communications manager for the city of Norco, and in 2018 I graduated with my master's degree and was done doing homework. So we want to start with Vicki.
I'm Vicki Leonard. I have been a business owner in town for many years. I just sold it though. And I was on ETAC in 2018, and I was a huge proponent of Measure R, and glad to be here.
Berlin Hannah, I'm a recycling city council person. I was on here for 13 years and was off 2 years. But I was on here when everybody on the council and staff got out and worked to get Measure R passed through the citizens, and I think it's been a good deal. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Rich Giesmer. I am retired from the operating engineers. And currently I work for I-9 Sports, a team sports organization. And 2018 is good for me because that's when we retired.
Well, good afternoon. Greg Newton, council member. Still work part-time as a senior project manager for a company by the name of Lord Constructors in Upland. Memories from 2018. Well, I grew up in the 60s, so it's going to be a little tough, but a couple of things I do remember is running for re-election with Mayor Bash and having a tax measure on the ballot. One of the first times we were challenged by an outside developer with some pretty nasty campaign literature, and, something that we hadn't really seen in Norco before. And couple other memories to that was, I believe it was the first time we had a debate at the high school with, well, 3 candidates showed up. And then on a personal memory, Christmas of that year is when my mom died. So, good stuff, bad stuff.
Kevin? I own a couple of businesses in town. My name is Kevin Bash. 2018, one of the high points was when the State Historic Commission laughed at the Navy and basically told them they were full of crap. And they would unanimously support the National Register, and it's been an uphill battle ever since. But that was one of the great moments. And running for re-election was one of the high points. Was we got to go to the high school and beat a Rob Cosell.
Yep.
That was a lot.
I'm John Blockham, retired 2 years ago, got bored, so now I'm acting, do background and primary, a few roles, nothing any of you probably have seen. You see me in the background. But my most vivid memory of 2018, and this brought back a lot of memories reading through this, of 2018 and all the discussions we had with neighbors and everybody about Measure R and why we needed it. But my most significant memory was at Christmas when my son and daughter-in-law presented me with a grandpa mug. So that's when they told me that it was good to be a grandfather the next year. So
I'm Catherine Allman, and I'm a city council member. And at the beginning of 2018, I had 4 children, 4 and under. So I had to look back in my phone to see if I had any photos to remember what happened that year. But that year, at the end of 2018, my birthday is Christmas Eve, and it had always been a dream to go to Disneyland on my birthday. So as a grown-up, my family and we went to Disneyland. It's just a really sweet memory.
My name's Omar Sanchez. I go to Norco High School. Feel free to get other things on like the side. But what's it called? My favorite memory, or significant memory, I was barely starting middle school, 2018. So it might sound crazy, but yeah.
Robin Brunmeyer, I'm a teacher, agriculture department at Norco High School. And a significant memory from 2018 would be doing a video series for the first time.
Same.
Sean Gill, I'm a construction manager for primarily public agencies. Unfortunately, my memory for 2018 isn't a good one. 2018, I lost a lot of my memory. I was in a really bad off-roading accident and down in Mexico, and so when I forget people's names nowadays, that's because. So I was unconscious for over 4 hours and had a traumatic brain injury. So still trying to cope with that.
Lori?
Oh, me too. What is that? Oh, wow. Okay.
A lot of people.
Lori Sassoon, city manager, local government nerd. 2018. Well, okay. One of the things that was great in 2018 is remember my daughter getting her college admission letter from Viola, and her being so excited to go to college and feeling like, oh man, this is really going to actually go to college, because she was one of those kids where like you just don't know, right? But she was going. So that was.
Colin Burns, City Attorney. I think 2018 for me was the year of Legoland. I had a 6-year-old at the time, and he loved Legos, and I sat so many times in that room where they build the cars and they try to make them go down the race thing. And by the end of that summer, I was like, if I never see Legoland again, it'll be too soon. And then when COVID hit, I was like, I wish I could just take this kid to Legoland.
Dana Roa, City Clerk. I think 2018, biggest memory is making the decision to leave a job I had for 15 years and start scoping out something new, and then whew, all of a sudden I'm in Norco in 2019.
Sophia Thompson, I'm Deputy City Clerk. 2018, I was in my 3rd year of college, and I think the biggest thing from that year is probably I got promoted to store manager of the Michaels that I was working at since I graduated high school, so that was a big year for me.
Good afternoon, Michelle Anglin, Community Services Director. 2018, I think I had to talk myself into accepting I was going to be an empty nester.
Hi everyone, I'm Maddie Hamilton, Facilities and Maintenance Director. Like Catherine, I had to look at my phone because I had a 2-year-old at the time, and we did a lot of camping trips, so that's one significant thing that we did. beach camping, Glamis, and just around town.
Chad Blaze, Director of Public Works. Gosh, I have no memories together. Except the fact I had no money for anything back then, so Measure R was great, so thank you for that.
Was that for Finance Director, 2018? Oh, I passed my one-year probation at the city.
All right. So today's going to be a little different. Staff's not going to be making any formal presentations like you may be used to. So I'm going to help guide your discussion, but this is really an opportunity for city council members and committee members to have a discussion together and find some consensus on a few Measure R related topics that have been talked about for a while. So staff's here to take notes, answer any questions you may have, maybe provide some background information, but this isn't a discussion for us, it's a discussion with and for you. So with that, Sophia's going to help scribe. It's going to really be like a facilitated discussion. But before we begin, just a few ground rules, just to make this as productive of a discussion as possible. So everyone's encouraged to participate. Just because council members are here doesn't mean that it's a council meeting. It definitely is a joint meeting, and we want to hear from everyone that's in attendance. This is a discussion and not a debate. So it's okay if you don't agree on everything. We can walk away knowing that there are items that we agree and disagree on. And then just some basics to listen to and respect one another, and try your best to let one person talk at a time. So in preparation for today's workshop, everyone was provided with a resource binder. I hope that you all found some time to go through it. Like John said, refresh your memory on some things that may have happened or maybe you didn't know that happened. So it was broken into 3 sections, and today's discussion is also going to be broken into 3 sections that really correspond with each section of your notebook, just to kind of help keep us on track as we go through this, because there is a lot to cover. I would like to note that no new documents were created for this binder. Everything in your binder is an original document. Some things may be spelled wrong from back then. Some things may not have an accurate number as they would today. So just to clear any confusion up if there was any of that. Nothing was modified for the purpose of today's discussion. So we're going to start with Section 1. So Section 1 explains the city's financial challenges and the state of Norco's infrastructure from 2015 to 2018. And it really previews those origins of Measure R. So a starting question for you all to discuss with each other is, what were your biggest takeaways from those documents that you read? For example, did anything surprise you? Was anything of interest to you? Did you learn about anything for the first time? And if, Sean, do you want to start with anything?
I guess what was so surprising to me was the budget deficit. I mean, I wasn't a resident of Norco in 2018, but through this, I've spoke to people in Norco that were residents, and they were kind of like on the opposite. They thought Norco was great financial shape. It was a big surprise.
You didn't realize the $4 million?
Well, it wasn't just that. I mean, when you start going through everything, there's deficits for, from then until 20 years. So, and, I work for a lot of public agencies and see budgets, and those are some huge shortfalls.
Good. Vicki, did you have any?
I just highlighted a bunch of stuff that I remember from our meetings, but the $88.6 million that would be needed over 20 years to sustain our infrastructure, and again, that we didn't have enough money to continue with the resources that we had, and just basic highlights of the things that we needed: fiber optics, widening Hamner, etc. But I thought the numbers were pretty interesting.
Anybody else have any other key takeaways? For example, did you know that an ad hoc committee even existed?
I guess for me, how early the ad hoc committee had been started, and how the ad hoc committee, in my opinion, and how early it was started was really being proactive and trying to find some solutions before things got into dire straits.
Did everyone realize that the idea for a revenue measure came from the ad hoc committee? Was that surprising to anyone? So,
Somebody who lived it, 2018 was actually becoming good years.
yeah.
I mean, 2009 was, we were really action.
Mhm.
We'd sit there and go, oh, we made another $1 million. And we just watched that. Big goal was $10 million. That was the big goal.
I know for me going through it, I was aware of the ad hoc committee, kind of like Robin said, I wasn't aware that their work went back even to before 2010. That this finding had been known for a long time, that we were going to have this type of revenue decline and a funding gap, and truly how much time it was worked on before Measure R was even Measure R. All right. So based on these documents or from your own experiences living or working in Norco, how would you describe the state of Norco's infrastructure back at that time? Yeah.
What do you say?
Yucky.
Yucky. I've never had as many flat tires as I did. The street that I lived on.
Yeah.
Like every 6 months we have flat tires. That's not an exaggeration.
I lived at Lake Norco, everything just went down my street. I call it Lake Norco.
Yeah.
And we would go in my yard, in my driveway, and then they did all the drainage on my corner. I've had lots of building on my corner since the time I moved in, actually. For 20 years, they've been working on my corner. But that helped a ton. But yeah, just that street was bad.
At that time, I don't think any street in Norco had been worked on in years. It didn't matter where you drove.
Yeah.
That made a big difference. And now and from back then.
So I think we can all agree that the streets were pretty bad, right? Does anyone, go ahead.
Oh, sorry to interrupt, but like, as someone who used the pole barns for over 20 years, we were constantly chaff flickers for a minute. We were fixing breakers and fixing things just to make it operable for when we needed to use it. And it was seriously like calling some guys in, all right, this is what we need to fix to be able to use city facilities for a week. And we just had to do the work to get it done because it wasn't going to get done if we didn't do it ourselves.
That was actually going to be my question. If anyone had experiences using any of the parks or city facilities or anything that...
Yes, I had hands ripped sitting on a bench at Kids Corner. Yeah, like slides that were dangerous to go down. Yeah, the trails.
We also didn't have enough law enforcement.
Yep.
That was a big issue.
When I moved here, I appreciated that because I didn't get any tickets.
That's why you didn't need a designated driver.
I just let stop signs, California rolls.
Enough law enforcement to work on a designated driver.
Well, the ball fields were all done by your board. You worked very closely with Brian, with Michelle when she came aboard. And I can remember civilians climbing the lights to change bulbs and stuff. You didn't hear that.
Chad, you should just leave.
I mean, it was volunteers that supplied all the dirt. I mean, that's why the fields look so nice, because moms and dads and grandparents were out there.
I thought that the reports were pretty descriptive. Like some of the words that I noted were things were deteriorating, they were neglected, functionally obsolete, I thought was very descriptive, and in jeopardy of abandonment. That was pretty surprising to me. That things were at such a state that they were just going to leave it and not look back because there wasn't any money to be able to pay for it.
Go ahead.
Please.
I remember we started the NARC team in 2004, and the city didn't have any money then either, but animal control, instead of them going out at night, we went out on large animals. We didn't go out on the dogs and things. I was going to say probably about the dogs and the cats in the middle of the night. There was a million night that we got up and went and put their calls here on the large animals because they couldn't get to them. And all worked out though.
What were you going to say, Kevin?
The turning point was the fire department. That was the point when we went from our own city fire department where that was a bloody battle. city council members that were saying, keep the firemen, who were paying, what, 2/3 of our general fund? Let's close parks.
Yeah.
But that was the first major turning point to get solved.
So speaking of parks, were all of you familiar with just all the parks and facilities and buildings you weren't, that were listed in that green colored document? Which ones did you learn about for the first time?
Pacer Park.
Pacer Park, oh wow. That's one of the nice ones.
I know, it is. It was nice, but I'm like, oh, that's, I didn't know it was there.
You didn't know about Pacer Park? Were there any others that you didn't know about?
No, pretty much looking, when we came out here and looked for a house, we were out here
Yeah.
driving around for days, just looking to buy out here. And so kind of ran into all the parks by just driving around the whole city.
There's a lot I didn't know about. I actually showed my mother-in-law, I don't know if she remembers any of it, but I said, look at all the facilities we have here. I had no clue we had this many parks.
Which ones, aside from parks, which facilities were surprising to you?
Just some of the buildings that we own for, I mean, I don't know, where's this one, I don't know what's it called, facility name, permanent, the restroom museum. They're just the different buildings for maintenance and things. I know the one on 4th Street, or, but I wasn't aware of some of these others.
Omar, did you learn about any new facilities or parks?
Yeah, I pulled this out in one of my classes, because I took it with me to school to read, and I was with my friends, and we just looked through all the things, and we didn't know half of these.
Well, I can remember a long time ago, the staff talking about what a disarray most of the city owns buildings. And that, I'm talking 25 years ago, maybe. I'm surprised some of them were stand up and got measure on it.
Yep. I think the main ones are obvious, right? We host so many events at Pikes Peak Park or up at Ingalls. But I think it's little things like the snack bar at Wayne Macon. That's a city facility that has to be maintained and operated and repaired. So, all right. So kind of wrapping up this section 1, it's a pretty lengthy document. But what do you think are some things that we can agree on as we're looking at the environment before Measure R? Like I'm hearing, infrastructure wasn't great. We can all agree on that. And that there was definitely a funding gap, and the city did not have available funds to maintain infrastructure and improve facilities. There's a consensus there? Okay.
And I would have maintenance, I don't know if you're including it, but for the maintenance of things that already existed, not just building new infrastructure, but maintaining.
Yeah, one of the things I thought was interesting was Measure A is referenced as just giving a little bit of money for streets at that time, but that there was no money for parks, trails, buildings, or facilities. Just blatantly stated no. So I thought that was interesting.
And the bonds,
Lots of mandates.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I found it interesting on the mood of the community. That was a big hurdle to really get people to get out and be in favor of this.
Well, the interesting thing about that video was about 3 or 4 cities in the county had tried a measure like this before we did, and they all failed. And as soon as ours passed, they put theirs back on the ballot, and I know 2 of them got theirs, I don't know about the third one.
That's interesting.
But it was people all over the county, and that's where I think the county's going to run into an issue this year, trying to get that 1 cent sales tax on the ballot to go along and help Measure A. Kind of how long it takes you to spend $500,000 on the streets for Measure A.
Okay.
Yeah. Before you get the check.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we've been getting that forever now. We've been paying out just about every year forever on that. But
So that would increase what we get.
yeah, they're going to try it. In fact, they're supposed to, I'm trying to get them to come here and do that presentation. Dana's handling that deal, so if they do, it's about a 15-minute deal that we
something to add that's really important. Andy Okoro was absolutely resolute. He said, this is gonna pass, and staff totally got behind this one. I think that combined with the videos you did, which were hilarious, but they actually told people what we were doing. But Andy and staff, I mean, they were parts, everywhere you went, you saw it. And I think that was a principal part of this passing.
I had never seen a community of leaders really educate the community on what and why we needed this. And I mean, I come from LA County, and the tax here anyhow is so much lower that it didn't even put us up with them yet. So, you know, a lot of people don't realize that we get away with so much and want so much for nothing.
Actually, one of the most shocking things that I think I discovered going through section 1 was out of the property tax and sales tax revenues, how much goes to the state and how much goes to our schools.
99 cents a dollar.
Our schools. I mean, I know, because I just did a $500,000 renovation, and I had to pay at the wazoo. I mean, the fees to the city were nothing compared to what I had to pay the school fees, and I just was shocked by that. And then looking at this, I'm now going, oh, they're getting a lot more than everything else. So
Yeah, absolutely.
they're getting too much to buy. That's the lottery was supposed to take.
All right, so with that, I think you guys have mentioned some precursors to section 2, which provided the documents that actually place the revenue measure on the ballot, which then became known as Measure R. And also in section 2 are the documents that were provided to voters during the election, from the more legal documents, the arguments, the attorney's analysis, and then also, you know, a nice little array of fun videos that took a lot of time and effort to be free. But blooper reel remains private, so don't worry about it. Yeah. So with that, we kind of want to start with what was important to each of you when it came time to vote on Measure R. And if you didn't live here at the time, or if you weren't of voting age at the time, what would have been important to you? So, let's see, John, do you want to start this one?
Yeah, I think, you know, I was a proponent of it, and I had a lot of discussions with my neighbors about pros and cons of more taxes, because we already live in the area where there's more tax rate, the landscape maintenance district and all that, so we always pay for that. But they were saying, that was kind of the big deal, is why do we pay more, because we're paying for this. But I was a proponent of it, really by driving through 6th Street and Hammer and how sad we looked, right? And, you know, I thought as a city we can do more. And especially for the rural lifestyle, this is such a unique place, right, in this state, and even in this country, right, when you go around the country. Just a very unique city, and wanted to keep that lifestyle. It's one set investment.
Richard, do you have anything?
Well, just that, you know, everybody, not to sound, but it's 1 cent. You know, when you think about it, and what you get for it is unbelievable. That, you know, the streets are now looking better, the whole city looks better, and it costs a penny. You know, it's like, you know, I mean, my wife and I, we were in favor of it. We have animals. She, you know, does dog rescue and stuff, and it's like, just didn't make any sense not to vote yes. But there was a lot of people who didn't look at it that way.
Well, at the same time, everybody comes to the town place for the same thing.
Exactly. That's the thing that, I live here and I want it to be beautiful. But as a business owner, every dime, every penny, extra penny somebody spends, it goes to us. And I was telling John before the meeting, and I'll express, I was doing it on the register. You could say someone's from out of town or from Norco. And then I also had a poll on whether they're here for the soccer, you know, from out, you know, just for soccer. But we haven't been 100% doing it. but about 15% of the revenue in my little tiny store comes from out of town. And that's huge when you think of the big scheme of here. So it's not everybody saying, oh, we're going to have to pay more. It's not us. It's anybody that comes to town. And I was so in favor of it, so in favor.
Sean, do you have anything? Because you didn't live here,
I
right?
didn't live here, but I mean, I've lived in this area for 27 years, so I was always from Norco, but yeah, I mean, Norco was in a pretty bad state. I remember thinking, oh gosh, I was going to move here in 2002, and I'm glad I didn't, because the roads are a mess, you know? So, that was my memory from it, but I don't know, I mean, I see lots of different cities, so.
For the council members, what was important to you? You may have a different perspective.
Well, I wasn't on council at the time. And I was actually one of the residents who got picked to take this survey.
Oh, cool.
So I remember taking it in my email. If you've ever given surveys and you see how dismal the results are, now I take surveys to help these people out. So, you know, I think, you know, when I took that survey, and part of just my value set is, you know, our taxes are paying into our community, you know, and they're providing services to our community. And so what we put in is oftentimes what we get out. And so I remember responding, yes, I would, you know, vote in favor. But before the ballot came, because, you know, there was time in between these things, you know, I had concerns about fiscal responsibility, you know, and where were funds going in the city, you know, that were creating a shortfall, not having, you know, or having looked at all this information at that time. And would those funds get used for their intended purpose? Right, that's your best.
Robin?
For me, it's kind of personal because I'm a person of my word, and at the end of the day, those videos are my word. And so for me, it's very, very personal because I put my neck out, essentially, for this measure. So I take it very seriously, and those of you that know me personally know, like, I am to the letter a person of my word. So when the debates and discussions and things like that come up, for me, you know, it's making sure that we are doing what we said we were going to do. And so going to the ballot box and even helping with the video campaign and doing that, because again, and it makes a difference. Like Kevin and Greg, if we're all just going to be super honest and real, they kind of had to stay neutral, right? Because they're trying to keep their seats on council. So you had to have somebody on council that was an incumbent, that wasn't in the, you know, throes of an election, and then make sure when it's done, and I say it all the time, I'm one person, 1 out of 5 votes, but at the end of the day, I felt like it was my neck on the line for this tax measure because of the videos and all of that. And I've always said, and I still hold this to be true, Norconians are incredibly smart people, incredibly smart, and most of the time, I would say, and I would even say 99% of the time, if folks know the facts and folks get the whole story, they're going to buy in. And I think a lot of times we hit a wall. Well, Norconians are conservative, they're not going to vote for tax. Norconians are this, they're not going to do that. And while overall, we're going to generalize, that's probably true, but I also know Norconians love this town. Norconians love the special place that we have. They know how unique it is, and they want to protect our little bubble. And so I think at that point in time, at least for me, wasn't a conservative versus liberal issue or this or that. It was really about educating and saying, okay, what are we going to do? Why do we need this? And then just making sure we stayed true to our word and what we said we were going to do.
Kevin, Greg, Berwin, on what was important to you during this time when it came time to vote on Measure R?
Well, it's kind of a balancing act in the sense that, one, we had been living this through council. So I was certainly aware of, like the mayor mentioned, obviously with the fire department, But then in the years following, just the cuts and everything that we had to live with on a daily basis. And I think where I was torn for a while was that I'm really not supportive of additional taxes. We're taxed up to the max, okay, in California and in the country. So that was a little internal battle that I was having, is how can we support an additional tax, but then I think it kind of touches on what Robin was saying. Sense of community was the stronger element with me, and the community was more important. And that's why I was supportive of Measure R and the tax increase on that.
Kevin?
Well, what Greg said earlier there about that developer, fighting that developer that was trying to kill our deal, that was a hard deal, but we've had bigger fights before. But I went around, it was all in Old Town, so that was the worst streets in the area. I probably talked to 50 people, go to their house and talk to them, and 4th Street, I talked to a lot of people. To me, that's always been the worst street in town for maintenance and narrow and puddles, not puddles, lakes, and everything. And I would talk to these people and I tell them, this is what's going to happen. It won't happen tomorrow or next year, but it will come. Your street will be repaired. The storm drains will be put in, even though county flood control is put in, and we have to do a lot of work to get it in, and I think we'll get rid of all that stuff. It'll be safer for you to drive. And the 4th Street was dangerous to drive on. The speeders come over and hydroplane in those lakes. And the same way on my street, I had 2 neighbors over at the time, they since moved. But they were totally against it. And one of them, I said, well, get your fishing pole and come out here in front of my house and your house. We're going to get rid of that lake out there. You're always driving about people coming through there fast and throwing mud up on your house. So finally convinced them and the other ones down the street. But it was hard. And I don't think if I had went around and talked to a bunch of people that they would not have voted for it. I don't know how much it passed by, but I figure I had at least 50 families talked into supporting the thing. So I said, look, the penny comes from everybody that comes through this town that stops and buys everything. That penny is not just coming out of your pocket. Everybody in the country is paying that penny. So they finally jumped on the bandwagon, but it was hard. And like Greg said about that developer, that was kind of tough there, but most people didn't, had any sense, didn't pay attention to him anyway.
So down at council, I got rid of the lake on Headley Avenue because Jim Crane and I got a rowboat. We were on a slicker and got fishing poles. David fixed it. I guess for me, it was a whole bunch of things happening. One of the things that when Norco was founded, I mean, Jeff Allred used to say, Norco is a bumblebee with iron wings. We shouldn't fly, but we do. And the thing is that if we had 80 houses on our streets instead of 40 or 35 or 25, we have a lot more revenue. We do not have the property tax to sustain what people begin to want in the city of Norco. So it wasn't just the Measure R that was happening at the same time. Kathy Azevedo and Berwin and myself and Greg, we realized that retail was dying before anybody knew it was dying. So we went out, we got Impulse Retail, Hobby Lobby, Tractor Supply, of course they had the auto, and then Silver Lakes. I mean, that was really fun to figure out. We were trying to find things because this motto was, come stay and play, leave your money and leave.
Yeah.
It was like we came up with this thing. And So there was a whole bunch of things that were happening at the same time. In tandem with the fact, we hired Chad, and even though we were getting pressure, we no longer, like previous unnamed councils, we wouldn't just pave the street without fixing anything underneath it. The old timers will remember when they paved 6th Street and it looked beautiful, and all the pipes underneath would explode. So now some of the things don't get done because Chad's come in and we have to wait. We wait for the county, we wait. So all these things are kind of happening. I think the thing that I was most proud of through those hard times when the budget was so bad is we got a first-class fire department and we didn't give up our sheriff's substation. We had 2 council members that wanted to close. Oh, you don't need that substation. They can drive from Riverside to Valley. And so those were the things that to this day, the truth is, I don't know how Norco survived all these years. But now it's a place that everybody wants to live. I remember in 6th Street, when I first got on council, all the trees were dead on 6th Street. Those days are, I hope, are gone. But I think that by passing that measure, what we've done is we've given ourselves just one leg of the financial solvency of the community. So, I mean, we look calm but under the water with our feet were just as fast as we could. But like Robin said, one of the big things was that you had a whole new group of people moving to Norco that they wanted the lifestyle, but they thought, oh yeah, and I want a road where I don't, blow my tires and stuff like that. And we were trying to make those 2 things happen. So in a way, we're a butterfly, we're a bumblebee with iron wings. We shouldn't fly, but we do.
Yeah, Kevin mentioned a couple different things there. He mentioned the auto model. When I go into a town, the first thing I look for is the auto dealers. If you have a bunch of empty lots like we had there during the first recession, that tells me the city's not doing good. They're not getting any sales tax on that. And I'm happy now that all of ours are overfilled and everything. But to me, when you go down to a town and there's 5 or 6 big vacant lots right there in the road, that's a sign of a recession in that town. And then he's talking about the streets. And I got to commend Chad on this. Chad puts the pipes in the ground before he paves the road. The old ones used to pave the road and dig it up and put pipes in, and you got to go in the middle. But I found
before an election.
Yeah, I found some YouTube videos of towns where I grew up, and Texas and towns in New Mexico that are dying. And I've been in every one of those towns. It's a sad fact. Took my daughter to 2 of them on the road. They used to be 50,000 people there. Now there's only about 200 because there's no economy. And why those people are staying there, I don't know if they're in retirement or something. But that reminds me of how Norco was beginning to look way back in the late 80s and 90s when things would fall apart, everything was deteriorated.
Well, 2008, the economic downturn.
Yeah.
I mean, the auto malls just died. I mean, what was our revenue, $2.5 million one year? It was something crazy, something ridiculous.
Oh, yeah.
So I think what we're all hearing from this is there's a consensus that Measure R is a good thing for the community, right? To support the lifestyle, keep the lifestyle, beautify the community. Everyone agrees on that? Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit more about the uses now. We're going to start kind of going down to some of those other topics. So as you know, Measure R is a general fund revenue measure, which means that the funding could be used for any general governmental uses. But the purpose of today's workshop and joint discussion is to determine some values and have a discussion on what Measure R funding should be used for. So in section 1, as we just put the notes on the back wall, we discussed various reasons that a revenue measure was needed. So going back to kind of the 2018 election time, what were the primary intended uses of Measure R funding that come to your mind? Whether it was for you personally or reading through the documents, what are some of those uses that Measure R was intended to accomplish? And we're going to start a list going.
Was streets,
Okay.
was a big one.
Yep.
Streets and our horse trails.
Mm-hmm.
Two of the big ones.
Yep. And I think that that's evident in that community survey, right?
Yeah.
Correct.
I would concur that it was streets and trails was the primary driver on that. I think our budget at the time, we were spending $25,000 a year on trail maintenance, which was nothing. And to me, I think that was the biggest concern that the community had.
Okay. Anything other than streets and trails?
Oh, being on EDAC was everything. It was just to keep our city open, not just streets and trails. I mean, you got your whole infrastructure. If it's not working, everything dies. And like Vernon was saying, I lived in a little town in Oklahoma that when I moved there, the oil boom had just busted. And they had over 20,000, it was a small town, so it happened in a town of 20,000 people. And when I moved there was 8,000 people. So I saw a depreciated town that had nothing. Now it's back to like a lot of people, more than that. But I love this place, and it just had to do with our police, with our drainage, with our roads, with the animal shelter, with our animal keeping, the rodeos, and everything. Keeping your job, his job, the whole thing. So
I think everything that you're describing kind of comes to fruition in the documents as vital services or essential services. That's a term that's used throughout these documents. What else do you think falls under those types of vital services? Facilities?
I think it was also discussed that we didn't want to lose our police and fire protection.
Right.
So, at the time, I remember there was a lot of discussion about cutting that, and it was like, well, if we had this, we could use it when we need to at certain times to supplement that so we don't lose our services, our fire and police service.
place for children to go right in town.
Recreational opportunities?
Yeah.
Yeah, that in parks. I don't know if you all remember the slide at, Neil Snipes was a lawsuit waiting to happen. That one was so old, it was so tall. There was nothing safe about it. It was fun. It was gone. It reminded me of slides, from when my dad was a kid. But it was, I'm surprised nobody sued the city for falling off of it. So.
Omar, Robin, Sean, any other intended uses from these documents?
And just the basic view of what Norco looks like when we drive through it. Like the maintenance of weeds and, the trees that they've been putting in and all that stuff. That's what a lot of people come here looking for also. If you're coming into a town that's animals and everything else, you want that look. And just keeping it is expensive.
Yeah. Brian?
Greg and Kevin remember this before any of us got on the council, we did the council meetings. And the council people and staff will be talking about maintaining the trails. What they need to do to maintain the trails. Never seen anything happen. I don't think they ever thought that they needed to prepare for when we had a downturn. Look at all the DG that got out of the mountain up there. Instead of stockpiling a bunch of that, they just used what they needed to use. Gave it away. And I don't think any of them ever had to, when they was a kid, had to go to bed eating a soup sandwich or something like that. They always had plenty, but that's what they acted like here. We gotta do something about this, but they've never done anything.
I think an unintended use of Measure R was really a determination we're going to sell out. You can't even believe the businesses we turned down, the projects we turned down that would have generated hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars. And so part of Measure R would have hurt the so I think that was one of the side uses, is that this gave us breathing room so we wouldn't have to accept the businesses that were coming here. We wouldn't have to accept, I don't know, what was there was a whole bunch of them that came here. We just didn't know.
Amazon.
Well, I mean, we would have made a lot. What was the other one that came where we had hundreds of people show up at the egg ranch, the huge truck depot?
The truck,
A Lear.
that was a big
A
one.
Lear, that was huge. And that would have been a lot of money to the city. And it would look like Marina Valley right now.
Would you kind of categorize that with the notion of keeping Norco? That's a really frequent theme throughout the documents. So, does anyone have anything else to add to this?
It might be a little controversial given our discussions last year, but around how to use the Measure R funds versus what we're seeing shortfall in the general fund. And maybe this is a table conversation that we have to have later. But there was a lot of discussion amongst the Measure R committee about maintenance. There were maintenance costs that were wanting to be shifted over from the general fund over to the Measure R fund. At the end of the day, there wasn't a consensus among our committee about whether we should do that or not. The committee voted mostly that we shouldn't do it. Some of us, myself included, were of the opinion that if we don't maintain what we're building, 20 years from now, we're going to be in the situation we were back in 2018, right? So I don't know whether this is the right time to discuss it with the council or not, but I think there needs to be some sort of a discussion about not only building new, like the barn is awesome, but if we don't maintain it, right? And where are the funds going to come to maintain the new infrastructure that we're doing? Should we use the Measure R funds to do that? If we should, how much of that Measure R funding should we use it for?
We're going to get to that.
Okay.
Yep, that'll
Good.
come
Because
just a little
I think
bit.
that's an intended use. It was interesting because during our discussions, it was like, well, no, nobody ever, we didn't want to do that. We didn't want the city council to use it as a fund to go into to dip in other things. But then when I go right back and refresh through, maintenance was listed a bunch of times. And even I think in some of the video, Robin, it was talked about, right? So, I think we just need to get alignment.
Yep.
Right, I think.
We're going to try to do that today.
Good.
So, any other intended uses? Let's take just a little straw poll of kind of go around the table of like this list on the side. Maybe we'll add lifestyle under public safety. That kind of, the beautification element, keeping it a nice place to live, keeping Norco. And let's state our top 2 choices for this intended use. So starting with Sean, you're up to me with color. You want to go last? I'll let you popcorn to somebody else so that you surprise the next person.
Just because of the condition everything currently is, I would say our streets need to be a top priority. More pressure for Chad. And probably facilities.
Okay. You want to pick someone or do you want to pick someone?
Go ahead.
Okay. John?
Streets, definitely. And for me, it's trails. Because trails represent to me what our lifestyle is all about. Right? So everybody comes to visit my house, they come and they say, where are the sidewalks? We don't have sidewalks. I can take my horses from here now. Let's go over and get a drink it.
Richard?
For me, I think it would be streets and public safety.
Okay.
Because of the way these people that don't live here drive through Norco, I don't know how many times I've stopped in the middle of the street because someone's blowing right through a stop sign, they don't care less. Especially when I was over on the other side of Norco and come down River Drive, they never started, they'd go around me at stop signs. So, I mean, if we don't have the police department here to try to stop some of it, we're in trouble.
Omar, what about you? What are your top two?
My top two, trails and lifestyle.
Okay.
It just like covers everything Norco is about.
Okay. Kevin?
For me, public safety and lifestyle. Number one is public safety, and then lifestyle encompasses everything else. There will be times when we'll have economic downturn and we may not be able to fix a park or a facility, but as long as we have the guiding principle of lifestyle, that's the one thing up there that we can't replace. Once that's gone, it's gone.
Vicki?
Well, I kind of agree with Kevin. Public safety, lifestyle kind of encompasses our streets and our trails. I mean, this building, everything that goes on here, so to me that's lifestyle.
Okay. And what's your second?
Oh, the public
Oh,
safety.
the
Public safety was first.
Okay, and then lifestyle number two.
Yeah.
Greg?
Actually, I should give you three, but
Yeah.
on the public safety side, don't mark it, but the way I interpreted Measure R was to prevent cuts to public safety, not to increase public safety. That would be a general fund expense. So my two are streets and trails, because trails protect our open space.
Okay. Catherine?
I would say streets, and I would say that reflects what I hear from residents. And then open space isn't on there, so I'll pick parks.
Okay. Parks
And
and
that also
space.
leads into trails, right?
Berwin?
Streets and trails. Lifestyle could be the third one.
Robin?
Can you repeat your question again?
Just your prioritizing or ranking your top two of these intended uses of Measure R that were kind of agreed upon by the group.
So public safety and lifestyle. In my head, I was thinking exactly along the same lines as Kevin. Number one, nobody wants to live somewhere where they don't feel safe, period, end of story. And then the lifestyle encompasses everything, in my opinion.
Interesting. Okay. We'll write down preventing cuts to public safety. Does everyone agree with that? With that sentiment, that Measure R wasn't intended to add or increase public safety? It was to prevent cuts or the reduction of public safety. Do you agree, Vicki?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
I mean, if we need to add and if we have to help, then we have to help.
Okay.
More people are coming through this town. Look what's going on with the homelessness and we just got robbed at Bank of America in Hidden Valley, you know. So I think public safety is just important.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would just say, like, it said prevent additional cuts, I agree, that's what the ballot measure said. But at this time, where were the levels? There have been so many cuts already, right? So it's also where you look at the baseline of where you're starting, right? Because that kind of changes where you would look at it, so.
Well, and if I can add on to Catherine, our environment and what law enforcement and our communities deal with now is so different than 2018. You didn't have the smash and grab, you didn't have this and that. Like, it's just a whole different world now than it was when we made this measure. A lot of stuff we see now, it didn't happen then.
People walking into Rite Aid and walking out. People that we know.
Unbelievable.
Maybe, yeah.
So, but I agree, the measure was 100% to prevent cuts, but it's a whole different world now than it was then.
Okay. We're going to take public comments at the end.
Okay.
So you want to save it? Yeah, sorry. Write it down so you don't forget. Okay, so kind of staying on this theme of these uses. Throughout the documents, there's a lot of phrases used that describe uses or list these uses. And there's phrases that are used quite frequently. And so we kind of want to spend some time on the big ones. So for the first phrases we're going to talk about, the documents state often repair, restore, replace, and improve. And to some, these may be straightforward words, and to others, they may be a little more open to interpretation. So we're going to do a short group exercise. We're going to split off just into 2s and 3s, and each group is going to be given a word And we'd like you to work together to create an operational definition, what this word means to you, and then to come up with 2 to 3 examples of how that word relates to Measure R funding. Like examples of that word in the context of Measure R. Does anyone have questions on that?
Kelly, you're going to write them on the paper?
Yep, I'm going to give you these papers. Any questions? Okay. So,
Shuffle those up.
this, and so we're going to do 2, and then you 3, and then we'll do the 2 of you, and then the 2 of you. You're good?
Exactly what happened right after we got to the I don't know.
She agreed to pull it, like, under the register of voters.
I still need to order and I have to.
Oh, yeah, Mark, Bakersfield, Marshall. Same thing. That's a race for
We're gonna start reading, Kevin's coming back. So let's start with Kevin, Greg, and Richard. So what was your word? What's the definition that you came up with, or what it means to you, and then what are some examples?
We came up with maintain, restore to a viable function.
And your word was?
Or repair.
So your word was repair, and what was your definition?
Maintain, restore to a viable function.
Okay.
Different examples, HVAC, electrical, lighting, roofing, streets.
Okay, so you could repair any of those things.
To a certain degree.
Okay, I think that's important. Okay. Anything else to add on that? Okay. Let's go Catherine, Omar, and John. What was your word, your definition, your example?
Our word was restore. Our definition was bring back to original condition or an improvement, modernization, or modernized version. Our example was reconstruction of roads, the vinyl trail fencing, and new playground equipment. And our actual one was the barn.
Cool. Okay. Berwin and Vicki?
We kept it simple. Ours was replace. Getting rid of the bad and putting in the new.
Okay.
Materials that were in need of repair. Example was water pipes. Second example was repairing the roads or replacing the roads. And the third example was replacing the bad trail fences.
Okay. Robin and Sean?
So our word was improve, and our definition was to make better than the current condition or status. And so example one would be trail improvements, and we grouped that, the vinyl fencing, the DG, removing the weeds, and then the other thing that Sean talked about was seeing the signs out at the ends of the trails when the crew's actually working. Because it's like, oh yeah, it's our measure our dollars at work. And then example number two were street improvements. And then example number three was new playground equipment as well at multiple parks was an improvement in the facilities.
Okay. Does everyone agree with the definitions and the examples that the other groups came up with? Is there any disagreement or any modifications? No?
I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm curious to learn more about the barn as an example of restoring. So the old ones were torn down.
So I guess our definition was bring back an original condition or an improved or modern version. And so it wasn't just bringing the barn, like restoring the barn to its original condition, but it's an improved version, right? The barn in some sense has been restored. So we used our definition.
That was our bonus one too.
Okay. Could we agree that some of these words are synonymous or interchangeable with each other? Or that some of these examples could be used for other words? Okay. Remember that for later on. But I'm going to take these so that I can reference this room. Okay. Perfect. Okay, so So another word that is used quite frequently in the documents is investment. I don't know if you also pointed that out as you were reading it or noticed it. So we want to perform the same exercise as a group and really kind of dig more into what that word means. I think it's a little more ambiguous or more open to interpretation of what does it mean to invest in something, or what are examples of an investment as it pertains to city operations or vital services, like we discussed in the prior on the intended uses. Do any words come to mind when you think of invest or investment? IRS. Okay.
What is your future?
Okay.
So investing in the future
To invest in your
for our
future.
families that want to stay here.
Okay. Someone else say something?
Yeah, I think that there's a return or a payback.
Okay.
Sheriff substation, that's an investment in our safety, response time, I mean, save money because they're not coming through the valley. I think that's important. Playing fields are an investment. The old saying is if your kids are on a playing field, they're not the back of the patrol car.
Robin?
We're investing in the EAT program to try to protect our large lots.
Yep. How would you define invest, or another word for invest? I think those are all really good examples.
To me,
Yes.
it's
Go ahead, Sean.
almost like to maintain.
Okay.
I mean, that's not the word that I want to use, but it's,
You have to give a little.
Right?
And that's the word that kept coming back. It's a give. I mean, and we make choices all the time about what am I going to give my time to? What am I going to give my money to? What am I going to give my skills and talents to? So I just keep thinking of the word give for investment.
Give or tithing, it doesn't have to necessarily mean church.
You know what? Who are we giving it to?
Ourselves.
Yeah.
And the future, right?
I think what do you think? There's a delay on the return. So an investment is not something that you put in immediately. It's time, or it's energy, or it's money that you put forth towards something that you will not see the fruits of that labor until later on.
Talk about a teacher, talk about it.
Compounded interest.
it's like your future.
Compounded interest, right?
Yeah, you know what I mean? It's not an immediate gratification. There's a time period that passes.
Yes.
There's a commitment
Yeah.
that goes along with it.
I mean, when the public thinks of investment, you're thinking of your money, your lifestyle, your retirement. So you're doing the same thing, but it's for the city. You're investing in the city's viability.
Right.
Protects or secures our future.
So it seems like there's a common theme of the future. Investments is directly correlated with something happening in the future. Versus some of these other words, like a repair, is more immediate. I'm fixing it right now. And it's a little more of an actual physical action versus investing in something a little more philosophical in some ways.
And you know what? You may not be the one to get the return.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
And you don't know that. Anything else to add with invest? Okay. So I want just you to keep these things in mind as we keep going through the rest of the conversation of all of these words that were used in these prior documents and talked about and used by different groups of people, and being inspired by them as we kind of pave a new path forward as we're talking about Measure R. So as John prefaced and previewed for us earlier, another term that's used quite often throughout the documents is maintenance. Maintenance, I think, could be performed through any of these actions. Restoring something, repairing something, replacing, improving. They could all technically be described as a form of maintenance. Even in repair, that was part of your definition, was to maintain something. So we want to dive into that a little bit more and spend some time talking about maintenance. So we're going to really really try to determine the types of maintenance that should be funded by Measure R, really following John's sentiment that he shares, that there's been some struggles with this up until this day. But first we want to discuss the 3 main types of maintenance that the city is currently performing. So you don't have to create definitions for these, we already did these for you. So the first type of maintenance, and let me know if you disagree with any of these as we go through, would be preventative maintenance, which could be described as the periodic inspection of infrastructure to make minor repairs before they develop into major issues. Does everyone agree with that? Okay. The next type of maintenance that the city is currently performing is scheduled maintenance. So these are routine services that inspect our infrastructure or our assets to ensure that they are operating correctly. And then the third type of maintenance that the city is performing is condition-based maintenance. So this is more regarding unexpected or emergency situations that arise when something breaks and repairs are needed immediately, or when there's no other alternative, like this has to be done right now and it really was not planned for. So are there any questions about those definitions or anything you'd like to add or modify before we go forward?
I remember one, and I could be wrong, but when we had something brought before us, and the maintenance was for the city trucks and equipment. And I don't think at the time we thought that was something that should have been covered by Measure R. So that's one of the reasons, John, that we had an argument, not an argument, but disagreement that night on the maintenance part of it, because we didn't think Measure R money should be going towards maintaining the city equipment.
Do you think differently about that today?
No.
Okay. We're going to
So why is
into
that?
Yeah.
Why is that?
Because that should be, you have a maintenance department, and the city equipment is bought by the city, and that should come from the general fund. Measure R is for, that has nothing to do with the lifestyle directly that the people here are after. I mean, that is a, I don't know how to use the word.
It's not great,
correct, for the city to do those things.
So thinking that through, so if we add employees who are out maintaining the trails, so we go from 0 employees to 2 employees, I'm just saying hypothetically, and we purchase vehicles for those employees to drive to maintain the trails,
Which we don't do.
does that change any of your opinion about whether or not we should be paying for maintenance?
It would make me think about it.
Yeah, right? And I
Not
think that's a little bit of
necessarily
the...
would change my opinion, but
Right, fair
I
enough.
have to give it some thought, because you can take every one of these things and you can stretch it out for 1,000 miles till you get the answer you want.
Right. Well, I think it's just, I'm just curious for your opinion, because I think for us, that's kind of a little bit of the wrestling we're doing. So thank you for sharing that as well.
Yeah, we'll get more into that.
I disagree with you because when we did Measure R, in my opinion, or if I got it wrong, it was to assist, to help maintain our entire lifestyle. And if that means that the city, the budget, whatever it is, maybe there's not quite enough to maintain a couple different vehicles or something, this money part of it could be used to assist on that. So therefore, we wouldn't have to dig into, take money from the police or from somewhere else. And that's what that overflow money is supposed to help maintain.
Right.
That's
But
what I
if-
thought when this was supposed to.
If Measure R wasn't here,
Well,
the
we
city
wouldn't
would
be
still
here.
have to have their vehicles to do the job that they have to do.
But if Measure R weren't here, we may not be sitting here right now.
True, I just-
Yeah, I think it also goes into a little bit of, the maintenance brought up a topic, I think, separate from maintenance, and that is how we manage our funds as a city.
For sure.
And I think it boiled into a discussion of, well, there's reserves that the council's done a great job of making sure that we've built up our reserves over the years, right? So that if we do have a temporary shortfall for a year or so, why aren't we using the reserves to do that rather than taking from the Measure R money? And I think that to me was a little bit of the back and forth that we had, was there was a difference of opinion as to when do you use the Measure R funds to supplement the general fund? versus when do you dip into your reserves to do that.
And
Right, so
that,
to me, that was the broader conversation. It was, and maintenance just kind of brought that up, I think. But the broader conversation was a little bit more of around, you know, when do we use that Measure R, as Vicki pointed out, to supplement versus other sources of funding to cover some of those, right? And I think that's where the kind of the conversation, at least with the Measure R committee, kind of went into a little bit, I think, was why are we using, instead of dipping into Measure R, why are we using, because we have built up a pretty sizable kind of rainy day plan, right?
But in the documents, it showed that it's a structural deficit. So there's a graph, I'm trying to find it, right? But if we dip into reserves, it's going to happen, and then there's going to be no more reserves.
Right. No, I
You know,
agree.
out of, so it's Measure R was meant to supplement the general fund, and the ballot language restricts for what purposes. But maintenance to me was included in that. And we start to get into, this is part of the discussion, right? But, well, was it created by Measure R or not created by Measure R, or was it here before Measure R? That's kind of what I hear, like if it was here before Measure R, then Measure R can maintain it. But that's like most things were here before Measure R, or if it was separate. So,
yeah, that graph is on page 141
I
of section
think that the disparity or the disagreement is Measure R money shouldn't be used for what the city should be able to pay for. But I think it's a matter of being responsible with how much and how it's being used. Not so much as to supplement or to help. Because again, like you said, if you dip into the reserves, those reserves are meant for what it was like 2008, when the city really might need to fall back on an emergency fund. Every family needs an emergency fund. That's what I teach people, you know. So I think it's more of a sour note for some people to make sure that we don't use all this money for Measure R to do things that they think maybe people are putting money, giving raises instead of maintaining, right? I think that's the question, that's the sore spot.
And that's really going to be the theme of workshop number 3, when to use Measure R. So you're definitely ahead of the game there.
It's only my third meeting for Measure R, so I'm not really
That's okay.
contributing to that stuff yet, so.
That's okay. So today we're going to keep talking about, you know, just those intended uses, and then workshop number 3 will really look at the financial end of the conversation of when to use it versus today's kind of what it should be used on. And that may change from year to year. But at least we can come to some agreement on major themes that we agree are appropriate uses. So, kind of going...
I'm touching on something she just said. The thing that bothered me the most about that entire conversation was, I really didn't care what fund it came from. I didn't care. But what happened is that it became a very public discussion, a Facebook discussion, and there were, and I'll be candid, there were people on the committee saying, well, if we don't do it you don't do it our way, let's get rid of the fund. And it'll be voted out. And understand, we got very lucky because we're not being grandfathered in. What is it? What is it? You can, what is it now, after 3 years or 2 years, you pass a ballot measure, you literally have to do it again and again. And we are grandfathered in, so it was that discussion that was really stupid. And I'm just going, you know, you're talking about a council and a bunch of staff that have created $20 million from nothing. For $20 million, and you're acting like we're just spending all this money like crazy drunks. And so I just sat there going, what are they thinking? Because, you know, for years we hadn't had to deal with the whole social media thing, and all of a sudden that came out of the woodwork. And I can tell you right now, all of a sudden this gets put on the ballot, and you have all those kind of rumors swirling around, it'll go away. And this is a fund that is really, it's an investment. Whether you spend it, I mean, do you spend it on the truck or not? But what about the tractor that makes everything work? Those are, and you've got to have that immediately. That's something that normally cities don't have. That's the other thing nobody takes into consideration. How many, all the arenas are dying. They're gone. I mean, City of Industry's about ready to go. I mean, you've got Blenheim is going. So you have this whole piece that's part of the barn. I can tell you right now, I was hearing, oh, we don't want to maintain the barn. I wouldn't have voted for it if I know that.
Yeah.
I mean, and that is a critical asset to promoting all that stuff. So those are things that you don't have in Corona. Those are things you don't have in Chino. Well, you have in Chino. You don't have them in your way, in your Valley. But I mean, you don't have them like we have. So, but it was the whole discussion of, well, let's just vote the thing out. I was just like, oh my God. I just want to put my 2 cents in.
Yeah, I think that we're uncovering some of those themes that when we look at what we discussed in section 1 about how much money really wasn't being given to these infrastructure assets, and we look at those particular assets and what would typically anywhere else just need preventative or scheduled maintenance. Realistically here, it's requiring a higher level of maintenance that sometimes equals replacement, which is a more significant cost. So in light of that, we're really wrestling with where that money comes from to now maintain those new or improved assets. The barn is a great example of an asset that was past the point of repair and restoration and led to a replacement, which is also a capital improvement. The Wayne Macon lighting project was past the point of just being able to repair it. Now we've got a great investment into youth sports and a city facility that attracts residents and visitors. So the council and the committee have really wrestled with this question before, but separately, and now you're together, and that's one of the main points of this particular workshop, is to really talk about these different types of maintenance, again, the preventative maintenance, the scheduled maintenance, and that emergency or unexpected maintenance, and maybe give some examples to see if they should be funded by Measure R going forward, if they were to come up. We don't have a list to prepare tonight, so it's more just talking in hypotheticals or using some past examples. Are you guys good with doing that? Yeah.
I don't want to get us into the next session, but let's use the barn for an example. So that now moved, that's an asset now. It's a new asset. Whether it's preventative or scheduled. Now we got to change light bulbs. Measure R pay for that? Or should that be built into the rental costs, okay, of that facility, right? And then you can expand that to say like Ingles Park. Okay, so you got a water truck and a tractor. Okay, that's more of a capital expense. But there should be scheduled or preventative that go into the rental fees. And I think maybe that's where we kind of disagree a little bit on that. I mean, and
that's what I was thinking too, is that they pay a lot to use those facilities. So a portion of the rent, well, whatever.
I mean, it's the cost, it's
whatever,
overhead.
Whatever people pay to use that facility, a portion of that should go towards maintenance of it. And I think if for some reason these facilities aren't being used and we're not getting the revenue, we don't want them to deteriorate. Say there is another recession and people can't afford to use them, then that's when we would suggest keeping them maintained.
But there's a certain degree to that. If the facility isn't being used, we don't have a cost to replace light bulbs and toilet paper.
Right, okay. but keeping the roof on, keeping the roof from deteriorating.
So you still have to maintain it?
What's there to maintain?
Well, I mean, in general, I don't think
It's
it's
deteriorate if it's not maintained, whether people are using it or not.
Except that part of it, remember, it's just like a ball field.
Right.
It's the ball field, the kids that want to have animals, it's the ball. And so I'm always happy if we get 50% out of that park. I'd be a happy camper. But it's a public facility, so if you charge too much, some of that cost has to be picked up.
But some of those costs have to be laid off into the rental fees.
But I look at everything as a business. I mean, it's from a business standpoint. If the facility is costing you more money than its return, then why do you have it? Now, I don't know the numbers of Ingles Park, but I know what the cost is. I don't know what the return is, but it's a lifestyle that you guys want to maintain in the city of Norco. So it's going to be an expense, right? I don't think it's a revenue generator for the city.
No, so what you're proposing is just to extrapolate, so the brand new equipment park, you need to make sure we pay an admission fee to cover that park. You know, and then there's indirect things, the trails. If we didn't have the trails, concrete's a lot cheaper in the long run. But if we didn't have the trails, we couldn't be exempt to a historic district for SB 9 and 10. So is it worth the money we're spending so that we can maintain our large lots?
That's what has to be decided.
Is it worth training kids to grow stuff and raise animals? And they will take, maybe a senior lives in the front house, they take over. What is the investment we're making there? But ultimately, if we're going to run the city like a business, that means we have to charge people to go play on the climbing structures.
On charge on that cost, like
Well,
we use the fields and the facility, and we don't, right? Because it's their community assets, and so we
'Cause they
usually
pay-
just try to break even, but we don't on everything. Like,
No,
we don't.
I realize that, but I
We don't
think
on
there's,
animals. We don't, that's an investment in the community, and therefore, we can't just not maintain it if it's not used as much, because then that's what happened, right? We know that's what happened before. Things were not maintained, and they started deteriorating, and then many things had to be replaced.
But already the barn has gotten revenue.
well, it's not always about the revenue though, it's your return on investment. I mean, is the facility that you're building going to give back to the community? And you can't just say, okay, it's a community of whatever, 40,000, 50,000, is it going to get back to 100 people, or is it going to get back to 50% of the people? I think everything has to be analyzed, and that's what you guys are for, that's what city council's for. I mean, the Measure R, we're looking at the way it's funded and the way it's going to be spent, but I think far too often the general public looks at it far more differently than maybe the city looks at it. You know, most citizens look at it from a business standpoint, and they're saying, is it worth the return? Is it worth the investment, that we're putting into it? So that's the way I look at it, and it's not always accepted, Kevin. I get it, but you pay property taxes for your parks. You pay property taxes for a lot of your
But in
facilities.
Norco, because of our large lots.
Right, you don't pay
But I can remember when we used to get lights for free at the, I was on the Park and Rec then. Remember when we started charging for lights? People came on here, well, what are my taxes for? Why does the league have to pay for lights? Why do we have to do this? We're doing all the work. I mean,
Lots of cities charge for lights, so.
Didn't we have a coin machine at the old arena?
Yeah.
They're in the dark.
They had the slugs. Somebody's putting slugs in there.
You can't put a value on the benefit to the community.
It's difficult.
Right.
But on the other side of the coin, government isn't known to be efficient.
Right, but you do put a value on it because you no longer have a pool, right? I mean, someone put a value on that and said, and I mean, I'm working with another city right now who's struggling with how much they're going to invest in their pool, and the cost versus the income is like this, right? So, but you still have to do it. Are your facilities aging and decaying? Are they being utilized? Sometimes facilities age much quicker if they're not being utilized enough. So, I mean, that's the struggle of a city. They have to weigh the values.
Well, when it comes to the barn, I don't think we really know yet what it's going to bring in because it's so new. And we've got horse week and all these things coming up. And the people renting spots there to do whatever they do inside there, the vendors, it's costing more than it had in the past. And I think with all the things that are plan to going in the future, I think it will bring in more money than we had in the past. I think the more we use it, the more we promote it, the more it'll keep getting used. But we don't know yet.
Oh,
So.
I apologize for this can of worms, I gotta leave. It's a class to teach, so. If it was gonna go longer, I could come back, but I think.
Thank you for your input.
All right,
Appreciate
thanks.
that.
See you next time.
So to be mindful of the time, we have about 20 minutes left and we have a couple of public comment cards. So it seems to me like there's not quite an agreement just yet on, agreeing to one category of maintenance that should be funded by Measure R. And it seems like we're still looking at it as a project by project or investment by investment basis. Do you agree with that? And we're not at that phase yet where we can say, yes, scheduled maintenance should be paid for by Measure R. You want to know what that particular scheduled maintenance is.
Yeah.
Yes, Richard? Is that how you feel?
Yeah, I mean, it's just, like I said, if you say scheduled maintenance, that could be everything the city owns.
Okay.
Does Measure R pay for all that, and the city puts more money in the general fund that stays there? I mean, there has to be a point where you say, no, the Measure R money is not for, in my opinion, maintenance of city trucks, oil changes and stuff. It's not what it's for.
Is there agreement that Measure R should be used for things that at least come back to the themes of repairing, restoring, replacing, and improving, like the documents foreshadowed?
There's different degrees to that.
Yeah,
Like we'll talk about HVAC, all right, heating and air. Measure R should pay to change out the filters or buy filters? No.
You see that as an operating cost?
Absolutely. You put that under preventative or scheduled maintenance?
But maybe if the transmission goes out and the tractor that does the arenas, maybe that's something that Measure R might cover. Maybe not.
Or like a recent example would be a fire truck went through a bay door at Fire Station 47. That presents an immediate need to safeguard the building, right?
No, they can use the other door.
There you go.
Board it up. Those guys are spoiled.
I'll give you a non-fire example.
They can only go forward?
Sorry, Amanda, I tried. Different example, the slope stabilization on River Drive, Shadow Canyon. Those came to Measure R, right? And that was an emergency need for funds. We agree that that's a type of maintenance that was appropriate for Measure R. Do you agree, Richard?
Yeah.
For me, that goes back to development, right? Like that is roads, right? If that was not fixed, the road would have fallen down, but I think it gets a little broader when we talk about facilities. Because like city hall air conditioning is part of a facility, so I think some of it's more clear, but when we talk about, everything can fall under facilities.
And can I have for that on that too? I think again, going back to the original talk about there was no money before. So like to Greg's example, like if nobody has been changing the filters because there was no money for filters and no person who knew to change filters. Should that come? And I'm not saying we have to answer that today, but that's a little what we have now because the general fund is funded. We have a little tiny crew, but a small amount of crew working for Amanda. We're facilities people now, and they're saying, hey, oh, by the way, city, you should probably do something about your sprinkler system in City Hall that cannot be certified, that had 34-year-old water sitting in it. Now, when you don't know what you don't know. So now we're doing sprinkler maintenance every year, right? So that was never in the budget to begin with. There was never money to do, and no human who knew how to do it. So that's the kind of thing that we're hoping you guys can kind of think through and wrestle through. Because the city's general fund is constrained. It just is, and that's what the numbers showed. So our ability to float those, part of me says they're improvements, but they should have been happening all along, but in the city's defense at the time, there was no money. So, and there were no humans, and there was no money for those humans to spend, so.
Question, if Measure R, because again, I've not approved or disapproved on anything before on this committee, but these things were not in the budget before, and say we had a pie chart and we gave percentages to certain things. Come up to the next budget, these things will be put in the budget. So right now we did a Band-Aid, and then it gets put in the budget, so then going forward, it doesn't have to be used from Measure R. Is that something that had ever been discussed? I don't know, so.
But I think the question would be then, the next year's budget, grows incrementally? Is there a room in the budget?
Well, then that's up for discussion, right, to see where that fits. But in the interim, if something has to be done, that's what this money is for, my opinion.
Yeah, maybe it's a little bit of a more of a process conversation rather than a what do we fund, what don't we fund. But how do we align as stakeholders, right, around this? And maybe, that may be our workshop 3, but maybe it's a process conversation. As Kevin pointed out, right, these things go, is there a different process we can use, or a different way that we can go about having a conversation, maybe align on some big things so that when the small stuff comes in, we can say it fits here or it fits here, right? And then maybe that's some discussion, right? Rather than, right, having, kind of the back and forth like we have. Yeah, right. So we can get some consensus.
Yeah, definitely. So we have 3 public comment cards, so I want to wrap this up. Go ahead.
Just kind of one last thing. Chad, maintenance on fire hydrants. Water fund?
Water fund.
We ever use Measure R for that?
No. Well, I think you should. During those times, we had over 400 fire hydrants that did not operate in the city.
Right.
Okay? And because we never did any maintenance, preventive, scheduled, whatever. So,
And some people said that wasn't a problem, but their house didn't run.
And air conditioners, I mean, my God, the heaters and stuff, they're probably too old to have filters. I mean, they would,
so I guess that's kind of where I'm, that other side of preventative or scheduled maintenance on a larger scale for infrastructure.
Okay. Are there any other follow-up questions or topics that you want us to bring to the next workshop?
I want to make sure that the structural deficit is adequately addressed in the next report, please. Exactly where it's at, why is it happening? I want details.
Yeah.
Okay. Catherine, anyone else?
Just something that I brought up in my conversation with Lori earlier, just the role of the Oversight Commission. This to flesh that out a little bit more.
Did anything stand out to you in section 3 with the formation documents?
Just that it's an advisory commission, right? And I know we want to hear from our stakeholders, but, and I think that we're getting into this century, but, right, like the people who are held accountable for the way that the funds are spent, with the audits and all of that, are the council members, right? And so, we're on the line to make sure that things are done right and the buck stops with us, and so just, and how do we, that's why we're having these meetings, right? Because we want to hear from our stakeholders and the Oversight Commission is so important, that was part of the ballot measure. But just what does that look like a little bit more and how can we be effective together?
Anyone else? Anything else to bring to the next workshop?
I think how we prioritize, that's been a conversation in the last few years that I've been on, is here's the list that are presented to the advisory committee, but that they're like, almost like givens. Here they are, right? And so I don't know if there's a way we can prioritize together before we get to that point, right? And how we can do that, and maybe it goes back to process a little bit.
Okay. Kevin, Greg, anything to add?
let's hear.
Richard?
I'm good.
Okay. Berwin or Vicky?
No, I agree with them.
Okay, so we'll take in notes and we've got all of the conversations that they documented and we can pick this back up in workshop 3. Did you like this format of a workshop? Did you find it productive or how you feel about it? Okay,
Good job.
great. Thank you all for participating. Yes?
Do we still have to do the vote?
Yes, we do. So I'm going to wrap this part up. Anything else to add?
I just want to make sure
Okay, so now the clerk will call the public comments.
Okay, the first public speaker would be Mike Thompson. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, I never read anywhere where Measure R committee was advisory. It's a, it says it right on the second paragraph of the city's website, Norco's Measure R. If I can quote, Measure R, was built with safeguards, requires firm citizens oversight, as well as the third-party independent accountants. So I don't believe you guys are advising. You're the oversight. And so the way I kind of feel about that is, apparently so far your firm oversight isn't making somebody happy, or you wouldn't be here right now. So when we talk about the maintenance, and that's a big broad thing, like Ray's pointing out. You're gonna get overdone because the general fund's in trouble and they're gonna come to Measure R for sewer lift pumps or whatever fund, but that fund's low, so that bothers me. Because I know I wasn't for Measure R in the beginning, because I was afraid we're only 6 years down the road since 18. I was afraid that there'd be squabbling over the money. That's just me. So one last thing, I'd like to staff, if maybe the next workshop, if you could for 6 years, put a list up of the things that Measure R has already accomplished, the major projects, how many miles of streets and curb and gutters, versus the total miles, how many miles of trail maintenance being maintained by the contractor, and vinyl fence that's been paid for by Measure R, the work at Riley Gym that's been paid for, the air conditioners at Nellie Weaver's that's been paid for, that kind of maintenance. I didn't hear a whole lot of talk about the park infrastructure. So when I talk about Riley, Nellie Weaver, things like that, but an emergency bill for a tractor to do the arenas versus, again, sewer lift pumps or something like that. That's what worries me though. I like the firm Measure R committee. So, thank you.
Our next speaker is Jim Pollard.
My name's Jim Pollard. I lived here in Norco for 47 years. So I've seen a lot of improvements. And not for Measure R money, but the storm drains that Chad's working on now has saved a lot of houses, and the streets that he's putting in with curb and gutters, it's an undersight that people don't understand how, like we were saying before, you put a street in and a curb and gutter, but if we have flooding off the mountains, everything's gone. So behind the scenes, that's a great thing. And then trails are real important to our lifestyle and everything. I think the backyard trails need a maintenance program of some sort that we look into, because there's safety and hazards to the riders and the horses that we have now going on with a lot of riding coming up. Thank you, and I appreciate this meeting.
Okay, and our last speaker is Bill Naylor.
Good evening. First of all, I'd like to compliment the Measure R Committee and Council for all the things that you've gotten accomplished in the last number of years with the Measure R funds. You do need to be very cognizant of what you're spending the money on, and you need to, I like the idea of prioritizing the things that come before the committee so that you can look at, well, we have money, but maybe we don't have quite enough, maybe we need to do this instead of that. That's really a good idea. On maintenance, it didn't cost much to maintain the old pole barn that we had. It was in bad shape, and we kind of just a little bit here, a little bit there to kind of keep it patched together. We built a $4 million facility to replace something that was very minimal in original cost. It was built mostly by donations and volunteers. You've got a much higher cost in maintaining that facility than you did the other one. Something to think about. Maybe when the city presents something to the Measure R Committee, on a big project, and I think really infrastructure is should be their major emphasis, is you should look at what the long-term maintenance cost on those facilities are going to be, and maybe they would be able to put some of that aside in their appropriation for that project. Not coming back later on, but think ahead, what are our costs going to be? That's just some of the thoughts that I had. Oh, and then I'll back up, Jim, on the backyard trails. We really need to look at that, and I truly think, and I've said this before the council meetings and such, that I really love the way we're maintaining our trails, but you know what? They could be pared back just a little bit so we have the funds to put into some of those backyard trails. So we don't actually have to reduce the budget, just change their assignments a little bit. It would work. Thank you.
I have no further comments.
All right, Commissioner.
If I may? Yeah. Mayor. Two public comments. Maybe we can talk next time a little about on infrastructure summary of needs by the ad hoc committee. Way back when on page 10 in this binder, it did address, the ad hoc committee did address backyard trails as a priority.
And then if I could just add, in our municipal code, in chapter 3.05, transaction and use tax, underneath section 135, citizens oversight committee, that's where I got the description of the measure R, and it says that no later than 180 days after the passage of this ordinance, the city council of the city of Norco shall by resolution establish a transaction and use tax oversight committee who shall act in advisory capacity to the city council to review of respective revenues and expenditures pertaining to this document.
For the summary of needs by the ad hoc committee, would you like to discuss the whole document or just the backyard trails element?
Let's start with backyard.
Okay, I feel like we've hit a lot of it today, and maybe it's more the conversation is, do backyard trails fall into the intended use of trails as an overarching thing?
I have a question. What's the difference between a firm committee and an advisory committee? Because he read that Mr. Thompson read that, and then you read the other. So what is the difference? Are they one and the same, or are they different?
That's what I asked for us to talk about.
Okay. Yeah, to give us a proper definition.
I think people have different interpretations of the
yeah.
role of the committee itself, and it would be good to have a common understanding of what it is.
Thank you.
Mayor,
Yes,
if I may, I just want to say that I'm very thankful for the conversation. I think that what lovely, wonderful facilitator, very well prepared, and just thankful for the committee members. And we have some really great, thoughtful committee members who are willing to engage, and I think that's fantastic. I wish we could have had more here, but some just had some personal conflicts, so they couldn't. But hopefully we'll have them next time. So anyway, appreciate that you guys made time. I know you arranged schedules to get here with the council, so thankful for that.
All right, with that, we're adjourned.
Reconvene the public session. Is there any reportable action?
No, Mr. Mayor, there was no reportable action. Council was briefed on the first item, conference with real property negotiators, and there was no discussion of the second item, conference with labor negotiators.
Moving on to the Pledge of Allegiance. Greg Newton. Moving on to city council reports on regional boards. Robin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Nothing to report.
Do you want to talk a little bit about our meeting we had with the CPUC today? Just a bit.
We did have a meeting with advisors to one of the CPUC commissioners today. We got 30 minutes, almost exactly, of their time, and we're able to make our case why we would like to have the CPUC open up our case again and hear it regarding the RTRP, or the high transmission lines that are going to go or proposed to go on the backside of Norco. I thought the meeting went well. I thought that the advisors to the commissioners listened, and a comment made at the end of the meeting, they certainly understood why this council is advocating so hard on behalf of the residents, that the impacts and potential threats of wildfire are serious, and they hear our desire to advocate for our residents. So that part of the meeting, I definitely appreciated those comments.
Councilmember Alleman.
On December 21st, I attended the Northwest Mosquito and Vector Control District Board of Trustees meeting as a trustee. A couple highlights for that. It's the winter season, so the district looks at maintaining and getting ready for the busier summer season. We had a presentation on bees, because there's been some discussion about whether the district should continue to service bee calls or not, given the decline in bee populations. So we asked for some more data to come back to discuss. And lastly, we'll be going out to bid for a new attorney for general counsel.
Councilman Hammond.
Thank you, Mayor. At our RTA meeting last week, we voted to approve the purchase of 25 Star Trans Senator 2 replacement buses for use in Dial-A-Ride. Also, they're a 12-passenger bus with 3 wheelchair positions. And we're also requesting approval to purchase 25 Ford Transit 350 EL vans for use in Dial-A-Ride. They're 8-passenger with 2 wheelchair positions. They figured that these smaller vehicles be easier to maneuver in traffic than what they usually use. And there is a lot of people that in the county that do ride the Dial-A-Ride. And the ridership has steadily increased, and there is still a ride free on Friday until up in June. And with RCTC, I believe next Thursday and Friday, I have a 2-day seminar out in, or workshop out in Palm Springs. So there's always a lot of good information comes from that workshop. Thank you, Mayor.
Sir. Mayor Pro Tem Newton.
Thank you, Mayor. Beginning in January, attended the Board of Directors meeting for the Chino Basin Desalter Authority. At this meeting, we reviewed our quarterly performances on basically water deliveries and just status of all the different wells that we have. And then January 11th, along with Councilmember Grunmeyer, staff, and our consultant, we had another waste hauler subcommittee meeting on reviewing the bids for our waste management RFP. That's all I have right now. Thank you, Kevin.
Attended the Western Riverside Regional Conservation Authority Board of Directors pre-meeting planning session. I've taken the chair position for the Western Riverside Regional Conservation Authority. One of the things that's occurring now is we're looking to redo the Hans process, which is the way we purchase properties, the way the land we're trying to conserve, it's within cells. And there's a predetermined place where these cells are. In fact, I think Mr. McGregor was the first chair. Were you the first chair of that, or W.R. Cog? That's right. Former Mayor Dick McGregor. Anyway, what's happened is there's a glitch, and a lot of people familiar with the plan have figured out that they can make a lot of money, more money selling to us because we're required to buy it than if they sold it in the private sector. So it could very easily bankrupt the RCA. So we're in the middle of working on that. It seems like whenever I become the chair of something, there's always this huge thing I have to deal with. Tomorrow we begin our Cal City's Revenue and Taxation Policy Committee meetings. I'm excited about that. And then we had our goal setting and review special meeting last Friday. And then, of course, the CPUC. And that's all I have to report. Moving on to public comments. Do we have any public comments?
Yes, Mayor. This is the time when persons wishing to address the presiding governmental body regarding the consent calendar, legislative matters, or matters not on the agenda may be heard. Please limit comments to 3 minutes or less. The governmental body shall not discuss or act relative to any general public comment. And the first public comment is from former Mayor Richard McGregor.
For those of you who don't know, Mr. McGregor is the second longest serving city council member.
Crab show in Vermont. In order to provide prizes, they are at the law, piece of artwork by a well-renowned and local artist. My wife was fortunate enough to win that raffle. We've been for 35 years at Penningham in our house. With Sandra's death, I've had to downsize significantly. But this one particular painting so stood out, I had to find a new home. So I'm going to offer it to the city of Norco, hoping you find a home in City Hall.
Gloria Bellotti.
For this painting. It's entitled Brand New by the well-known and local resident of Norco, Gloria Bellotti. I hope you find a good home to remind you of acres of neighbors, city living in a rural atmosphere, Georgetown, USA.
Let's come down and get a photo of that.
When I was on city council, our meetings lasted till 2 and 3 and 4 in the morning, so we're not having that much fun.
We're out of here by 10. Thank you, Mayor McGregor.
Thank you.
Next.
Our next speaker is John Lotta.
Who was that?
John Lotta. Oh, no, sorry.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor. Mayor Bass, honorable council members, I rise this evening to register my protest to the council's recent action of bypassing Councilmember Allman once again for Mayor Pro Tem. This is the second time in less than a year. As a citizen looking in, not knowing the inner workings, I see only two reasons that Councilmember Allman was skipped over. First is that she's a Democrat in a red city. I would certainly hope that is not the case. Simply because someone is in a different political party, they shouldn't be passed over for honorary positions or for any other reason. It's a form of discrimination. And as we know, whether it's legal discrimination, as the attorney will define, or just discrimination, all discrimination is wrong and harmful. Additionally, although it's been a very long time since I chaired the Charter Committee, I don't recall us ever changing the general law aspect of how we run the city. So it's a nonpartisan city, and everybody should act in a nonpartisan way. Additionally, if any members of the council ever feel as though Councilmember Allman or anybody has thrown them under the bus on their recaps or whatever they put out, they should talk to them about it. Perhaps by looking in the mirror, you'll find that it really wasn't her throwing you under the bus. It was your statements or behavior that threw you under the bus. I would also like to remind the council that it is not the responsibility of the city council to discipline or reprimand one of its own. That's our job as citizens of the community and voters of the community. We'll tell you in November whether or not you've done a good job or a bad job, but it's not the council's term. Each of you were elected individually by the citizens, so everybody serves on an equal basis. Brings us to the second possible reason. It was just simply a personality disagreement. And that should have been left on the playground many, many years ago. Personality differences will exist, do exist, and in all honesty, that is part of the magic that makes government work. Without different personalities, without different perspectives, if the council all votes the same all the time, we don't need four of you. Think about it for a minute. You want people with different perspectives. You should take their input, analyze it, give it consideration, and see whether or not it works for you. Council member Allman regularly attends council meetings where she participates and enters into city debates. You may not always agree with her, but she was elected by us, the citizens of Norco, and many of us do share her perspectives on various issues. And as you were elected by citizens who share your perspectives, each should take the other's
Mr. Latta,
perspective and consider
I need to stop you at this
Yeah,
time. You're over
I'll
the
take care of
Thank you
that.
so much.
Yeah, thank you very much, sir. And thank you for your past service to the city. Next.
I have Tammy Friedrich.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council. I came here tonight to express my disappointment once again that a fair Mayor Pro Tem rotation was not followed during the last meeting. I watched the meeting from home and can honestly say that although I was frustrated, I wasn't surprised. This is not good representation of the residents you all serve. I can't help to think how childish some of you are in your treatment of one of your fellow council members. City council members do not have to like each other, but should respect each other. I have witnessed much disrespect while watching these meetings. All of you were elected fairly by the residents of Norco. Please respect them with your actions and behavior. In the spring of last year, a few of you voted to set a policy that would keep the unfair practices of the mayor and mayor pro tem in place and set in stone. This is dangerous precedent, and again, does not represent all of the voting citizens of Norco. I urge you to revisit the policy and make amendments that would better align with the values of Norco residents. Maybe term limits would serve the city of Norco better. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Our next speaker is Tricia Autry.
It's all right. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, council members. Bear with me, I'm nervous. I've never been to a city council meeting before.
It's okay, welcome.
Thank you. So respected council members, I stand here before you today with a plea for fairness and equal representation for our city. As a Norco City resident, I please ask you to consider my thoughts. Our city has a wealth of diverse talents and perspectives, and it's time to recognize and embrace the leadership potential within all of the city council members. Moving forward, Norco needs to enact a formal rotation for which all elected city council members are given a seat in the position of mayor pro tem and hopefully mayor. In denying a qualified woman her chance at a mayoral or mayor pro tem position, we risk shifting the progress that comes with the variety of voices at the table. Catherine Alleman was voted to Norco City Council by Norco residents. She does represent the voice of Norco residents who choose to vote for her based on her background, her perspectives, her passion for our city. With the Norco Council vote that took place last month, with regard to Mayor Pro Tem, voices in Norco were dismissed, including my own. As Council Member Robin Grunmeyer stated in last month's meeting, every single one of the seats up there is the same. As Mayor or Mayor Pro Tem, one individual does not hold any more power than other council members. So why deny an elected representative a seat as Mayor Pro Tem? Our Norco City Council must move beyond making these decisions personal and appreciate the skills, the experience, and insight that all elected city council members could bring to the helm. A city council should establish a structured procedure for the rotation of mayors, ensuring a fair and inclusive representation of all voices. This process should allow for all elected officials to have a year as mayor pro tem or mayor without individual members of city council changing that process based on their own opinions of their fellow council members. Implementing a formal rotation system enhances transparency and ensures that our mayor and mayor pro tem positions truly represent all of the voices in the city of Norco. Please take time as a city council to create a formal rotation that is followed annually to allow city council members a seat in these roles. I fully understand that the current positions can't be changed. I get that. But moving forward, our city needs to operate with a fair process so that our voices and our votes are equitably represented. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
The next speaker is Bonnie Slager.
Hi, Bonnie.
Good evening, everybody. Tomorrow night is our monthly Norco Horsemen's Association meeting, and I wanted to make sure and invite everybody. The property that is currently being occupied by Quikrete Products, hard to say, they have indicated to the owner of the property that they're not planning to renew their lease when it comes due, which I believe is not until the end of 2025, but I'm not sure about that. Anyway, so the owners of the property, the family that owns it, has hired a development company to look at possibilities, and this company is going to present at our meeting tomorrow night. I believe they have talked to Miss Lori and to you, Alma, and so they're ready to sunshine to the community some of the things that they're looking at for this property. So I want to make sure that anybody that is interested in what might go on with the property, they're welcome to come to our meeting, 7 o'clock tomorrow night at the American Legion. Thank you. And as Councilmember Newton, we wanted to make sure that our new police chief had a halter. So there you go.
Thank you.
Now, what you have to do is make sure all your people are trained, and I think their final exam should be to put a halter on Councilmember Grunmeyer's donkey, and lead it around the block. If they can do that, they're studs. Thank you.
Bonnie, I won't be able to attend that tomorrow. I'm going to something at Norco College for women trafficking, but I'm sure council people will go. So, next.
And our last speaker card is Greg Bowen.
Hey, Greg.
Sorry about my appearance, but I'm in clean stalls. And when I leave here, I'm going to go finish it because rains are coming. A few of you were on the city council when my father-in-law, Harvey Sullivan, went through the same thing he went through. Wasn't appointed as mayor or mayor pro tem. Looking at the circumstances around that, it was justifiable. I'm not saying they're the same circumstances, but knowing everything that I've heard and witnessed firsthand, I have to file for the city council on what they did. And I apologize. It does hurt. It hurt our family. But when you look at what was said and how it was affecting the city, it was the right decision. And sorry I had to go through that. I really apologize. I said, but it happened to my family. But like I said, Harvey, love him to death. He's my father-in-law. Respect him. Will never say nothing bad about him. But it was the right choice. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Greg.
Mayor, I have no further speaker cards. Thank you.
Closing public comments, moving on to the consent calendar. Do any council members have any item they would like to have pulled? And if not, we'll hear public comments, if there's any.
Mayor, we don't have any public comments. They're now using public comment at number 2, so before, so we're good.
Do I have a motion to approve then?
Move to
Approve.
approve.
Second.
Let's take it to a vote.
Please vote. And motion passes unanimous. Thank you.
So moving on to 5A, the order of presentation for discussion items will be 1, staff report presentation, council questions of staff, 3, public comment, 4, council discussion and action. So moving on to 5 is grading policy and expanding the definition of an approved development plan. Director Robles.
Yes, good evening, council. This evening we have before you agenda item 5A, which is, in a nutshell, it's a discussion of our grading policy. So the recommendation is that the council, present any discussion and direct staff for any follow-up actions as deemed appropriate. And so the current city practice for as far as grading permits is that grading permits are only issued for larger projects that have an entitlement approval. When I say entitlement approval, it's basically like a conditional use permit, site plan approval, etc. And that's for larger projects. And for smaller projects, grading permits are not issued unless we have a pending application, a building permit application, like for example, building application for a new single-family home. So in that policy, the way we handle that, it's based on the criteria in Chapter 6.32 of our Norco Municipal Code. So That's basically the gist of my presentation. Chad, Sam, and myself are here to address any questions that the council may have with respect to our grading policy. And with that, I will conclude. Thank you.
Berwin, you want to start? Have any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Alma, these people that are doing these excavations, now are they getting a grading permit to begin with, or are they skipping the whole ball game?
Well, they're supposed to. If the grading operation exceeds 60 cubic yards, a grading permit is required. If they're not getting a grading permit, then they're in violation of the municipal code.
So, I know years ago they excavated these places up there on Hamner and one up there on the First and Temescal. Has there been any major excavations going on in town that
Not to my knowledge.
didn't get permits or anything?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Newton.
Evening, Alma.
Good evening.
One of the reasons I asked city manager about this was, as Berwin brought up the mining operation that was at First and Temescal, and then of course on Hamner Avenue. But it was more of a lack of enforcement in our code and our ordinance that became the concern to me, that that we just weren't following up with that on an enforcement basis. And I guess my question is, right now, that you may not be aware of some instances, but I know of at least one where there's a property owner that just bringing in dirt, mounding it up, and nothing's happening with it. So I'll let him talk about that a little later, but what that triggers is that we have a category under dust. So we have fugitive dust that, you know, we're not going down that road and enforcing. And I just want to make sure, so on single family homes, you have to submit your plans, paid plan check fees, and then we'll look at a grading permit. It has to be in the process. On residential.
On residential, there has to be, for example, if it's a approved project. If there has to be a approved project. If there is for example, on a single family lot that doesn't have any development on there, there has to be a building permit in the process in order for us to be able to issue the grading permit, or at least.
Yeah, and I understand on the commercial and industrial, as long as there's entitlements. But to me, it becomes some of the enforcement and to clean this up a little bit. So.
Yeah, and keep in mind also that, for example, just to clarify, a point of clarification, if there is an existing single-family home, and say they want to do some grading in the backyard, they would, if it exceeds 60 cubic yards, they would have to come and get a grading permit. They don't necessarily have to have, you know, an approved building permit because there's already a house on there. But if they're moving more than 60 cubic yards, yes, they will need to get a grading permit with, you know, property with existing development. Just a point of clarification.
Time constraint on that?
Right.
Or can they just allow them to stockpile?
Well, there's a difference in relation to stockpiling versus grading. So if we say a situation Alma gave, there's already a house and they have a plan to maybe do an ADU, but they haven't submitted anything. In that particular case, if somebody wanted to grade, they put their pad in, and we review that grading plan, and we can approve that and issue that, and it includes the proper BMPs and requirements regarding any type of managing any flow from the property. They're not impacting another neighbor. All those things have to be put in place as they construct it, but they're not going to be allowed to stockpile just debris just because they want to for material. So the intent is going forward with that permit, we're going to be inspecting it and reviewing it and make sure that again you have left a clean, appropriate site. You can make a request to stockpile material as part of your grading plan, bringing material in, maybe you're building it up. But again, there's a process for that to make sure, okay, when's your planning move forward, this how you're going to do it. And if they're going to have it there, that there's proper measures for them to make sure they're mitigating any dust because of the wind, how big that stockpile will be, covering it, etc. We would deal with those things on a case-by-case basis as the weather approaches. We advise them, hey, you gotta mitigate this, we're getting complaints because of the beach dust, you're not watering it down, things like that.
But reading through this, and this is kind of an I gotcha one, and it's a test for you. Do you know what a hummock is? So in our code, it says construction and controlled fills, property has to be free from ruts and hummocks. So a hummock is a mound that is used, or you find geology-wise, either when you have permafrost, like in an Arctic area, or in a marsh. So could we change that to read mounding? Since I have no idea what that word means. 6.32 100. That's all I have right now. Thanks. Councilman Alden. Robin?
No question.
I guess my only concern about grading doesn't have a whole lot to do with this. It's that sometimes, for example, we have a property adjacent to us that has a, what's it called? That's been there for quite some time. And then what really bothers me is that we actually had a neighbor that, it's long but couldn't get anybody to understand it, actually raised the property by an entire 1.5 feet. And yet they said that they had not displaced dirt. And that was extremely upsetting because it's completely changed the flow of water. We have a flat rock. And so it makes it, I want to have trust that when people go out, they actually can tell when there's too much dirt or grading is taking place. So that's my big concern. But lately I'm feeling more and more confident that that's happening. That's a big issue. I've got 2 properties that there's issues like that. Public comments.
We have one speaker card, Greg Bowen.
What does he know about grading?
Thanks again. I was going to go home, but I saw the grading one and I want to speak on it. I know this firsthand, and I've dealt with the city firsthand. It sucks. Trying to pull a grading permit as a homeowner is bad. I mean, you get no help. You walk in there, unless you're a council person, you're not going to get squat. They're just basically going to tell you, go get an engineer, spend $2,500 or more to get somebody to draw up a piece of paper when you're just putting dirt on your property to be able to fill stuff. I know this firsthand, and it's a sore spot. And it has to do with, and also with the building department. We have the people in our field that are working, the inspectors, our public works, those guys are great. But when you walk in the door to City Hall right here and you deal with public safety, now that Kathy's gone, I'm scared. I mean, I don't see, it's scary. I mean, I had to navigate it. I'd rather go to Riverside. I built houses in Riverside. I walk in there 2-3 days, I'm done. I come over here and I'm like, oh my God, I got to wait another month, 2 months, 3 months. I pulled a sewer permit that took 1.5 months. Not right. I literally, why? Because the girl that was in charge was on vacation. And the other girl says, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to name names. But then it goes the same thing with dirt. We clean our stalls. We go through a lot of dirt. I'll take 1, 2, 3 piles of dirt that I can find and pile it in my backyard because I'm constantly losing dirt because I clean my stalls like we're supposed to. So I'll lose probably in a year, probably about 4 or 5 dump truck loads of dirt a year that's being picked up with my manure. And I don't want to change. You know, everything drains the way it's supposed to. I get it. But if I was to have to go get a grading permit, you're putting an added cost on it that we don't need. I mean, it's, you already have something on the topos map. You already have it. And it just takes somebody to go out and say, okay, yeah, it's flowing the right way. I mean, we need to make it user-friendly for our getting it. And we need to make public safety building the same way. Because we go in there, it just, I'd rather deal with Corona, any other city in Norco. And I get that across the board. My brother's an inspector. And the rumor is, in the inspection companies, Norco's really hard to find. So I apologize. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Greg. Thank you.
I have no further speaker cards, Mayor.
All right, moving on to council discussion and action. Discussion, action, motions.
Move to approve.
Wait, do I hear a second?
Mayor Point? Be helpful to know, and if suggestions to make the edit that Mayor Pro Tem suggested, my thought would be that we hold that until we have other code updates to do and we roll it in like we've got another cleanup item, just because the time and expense to do a code amendment, if that's okay. It won't be long, I'm sure. We're always amending the code, so we would just do it at the same time if that's agreeable to the Mayor Pro Tem.
Oh, that's fine with me. It was just a word that I had never run across. Okay. And so, like Lori, you and I had talked, it was more of, I'm not worried about a homeowner stockpiling a few loads. You know, it's the over 60-yard operation and the mining operations that were transpiring.
Absolutely.
And that, if you want to wait on rewriting it, it's fine, but it was more of, we need to get some strength in the enforcement part of that.
Yeah,
Was
and Mayor,
my main.
if I may add to that too, and I think I've discussed with Councilman Newton. So we've discovered a number of months ago that there was some lack of clarity among the staff as to what sort of evidence was necessary to do that enforcement. I think some former legal advice on that matter. I think after that we've had some new discussions with Colin and I and the team, and we're comfortable now with some of our protocols that we could use to do that enforcement going forward. So if people see problems, they see neighbors changing the grade of their property and they want to know if there's a grading permit, please do let us know. And we can use things like video evidence from folks' cameras and things like that to establish that the activity has gone on and make a code enforcement case. So we're doing that at this point.
Can I make a substitute motion?
Well, what they're looking
Be
for is a
filed?
recommendation, city council discuss and have directed further actions.
Motion is to receive and file.
Discussion. Is there a second? I'll second it. Oh, Berwin's got it.
Please vote. Motion passes unanimous.
Moving on to 6B, recognizing 2024 City of Norco anniversaries.
Good evening, everybody.
Adam Newton.
How's it going? So at the last regular meeting, December 6th last year, Mayor Bash made a motion to agendize an item to discuss the upcoming anniversaries occurring in 2024. As you know, last year we celebrated the 100th anniversary of the creation of the Norco Township and had a really successful campaign with that. However, this year we are celebrating the 60th anniversary of the city's incorporation, also known as its birthday. And then with that, we are celebrating the 10-year anniversary of the unveiling of the Veterans Memorial Plaza at the Ingalls Event Center, which was provided as a gift to the city of Norco in honor of its 50th birthday. So I'm just going to cover a couple of points from the staff report, and then this is really just more of a council discussion and direction to staff moving forward. So while the 100th anniversary of the creation of the township and the 60th anniversary of the city's incorporation are technically different anniversaries, they both celebrate Norco and its lifestyle. So with that, we are recommending that this year's efforts focus on recognizing the 10th anniversary of the Veterans Memorial Plaza. Your staff report outlines a few different types of recognition. Some of these were recommended by Mayor Bash. So the first would be to amend the current Veterans Memorial Plaza logo. It's the silhouette of the soldier saluting in front of the American flag. And that would just be a simple amendment to that logo of just adding years or the words 10-year anniversary, but not creating a brand new logo like we did for the 100th anniversary. And then Mayor Bash has also requested or recommended selling limited merchandise, similar to how we did for the 100th year anniversary. However, this would be a much smaller collection of merchandise that we would sell, including one color t-shirt, one color hat, and a challenge coin that would be featuring the amended artwork for the anniversary. We have briefly discussed an event recognizing both of these important anniversaries together, and staff's recommendation is to recognize both at the Veterans Day ceremony in November. And we discussed this during the budget process this past year. This would be a new form of recognition of utilizing the banner poles on 6th Street to feature banners not for the military banner program, but honoring the 10-year anniversary of the Veterans Memorial Plaza by featuring the individuals who are on the Lest We Forget wall at the memorial. And we have 42 military banner poles and approximately 39 individuals as our last count who are on that wall. And funding was already allocated in this year's budget to cover the cost of those banners. On the back end administratively, we have paused the military banner program and have we've instructed anyone who has wanted to apply for this year that it is on hold and will reopen in 2025 for the general public. And then as we did for the 100th and as we do for most of our other observances, we would be creating multimedia content to promote both anniversaries across our social media and communication platforms. So at this time, I'm happy to answer any questions and then the council discussion to follow.
Yeah, I had sent some questions over before about merchandise. And so my question is, what's the impact on staff in terms of designing, ordering, and then maintaining inventory and selling merchandise? I know we did 2 orders for the 100-year anniversary because wonderful, we sold so many. Yeah. But if you could just speak to that, and do we, is staff time covered? And then, do we still have things left, merchandise left from the 100-year anniversary?
Yeah, absolutely. I can cover those questions. So to put it bluntly, it is a considerable effort. It is not a part of, typical day-to-day operations to be managing merchandise or a storefront, especially in the way that we took on for the 100th anniversary. Granted, that was a very significant anniversary and people rallied behind it. When we looked at the staff hours, as your question was, of how many hours were dedicated to managing merchandise and how many staff hours were dedicated to planning a new event, we're in the hundreds. We didn't come up with an actual estimate for you, but I will note that it is a citywide effort. It takes effort from the communications department, community services, facilities, transporting all of the merchandise, city clerk and administration with people coming to the counter, finance, and IT. So it's not to say that it's an effort that's not worth all of that on the back end, because our profits from the 100th anniversary, I think, show that it was definitely worth it. One of Councilmember Alleman's questions was how much profit we made from the 100th anniversary merchandise. And to date, our total sales were just over $25,000. that was generated from May to December of 2023 with expenses of around just under $22,000. So we are in the black in terms of that, and we do still have product left on the shelf. So that total sales number should only be increasing. I would say in terms of the product left over, we have less than 20% of the total product that we ordered. And I will also note that all sales were in-person sales. We had no e-commerce options for the 100th anniversary merchandise, which equals staff, right? Of people being at events and selling these things and the physical labor that goes into preparing and managing and transporting that merchandise. But does that answer your question?
Yes, but for the profit, that doesn't include any staff time, right?
That did not include any staff time.
That's just, we purchased it for this much, we sold it for this much, we made around 3,000, but
Correct.
that doesn't account for all of the labor that went into
No
managing
operational costs are included in those numbers.
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't have any questions.
We have no public comment, Mayor.
Closing public comments, bring back the discussion and action. So I remember when that memorial was talked about, and there were 4 people that opposed it. It's right back there. So the room got packed with veterans. I remember Downey Guthrie standing there. He said, "Who doesn't want this memorial?" And every head turned, and I haven't seen those people in the council since. I think that part of the importance of this is we're trying to remember those 30 plus names. I think it's every bit as important as many of the other things that we do in the city. Staff time is difficult, but then again, this is a city that we came from 35,000. 35,000. So I think that when we talk about support for people and actions, the city of Norco, overwhelming residents support. So I will make a motion. I have a question though, should we do a subcommittee of some kind to talk about this? Or what works for you to limit the staff?
I don't see the particular needs for a subcommittee, especially with all of the recommendations in the staff report. I feel as if staff has pretty clear direction based on the motion that you
made. The anonymous person that decides this.
As long as they stay anonymous.
So I'll make a motion to approve this. Yes, as it stands.
So to point of clarification, Mayor, so we're talking about doing a T-shirt for honoring the 10th anniversary of the memorial, doing the challenge coin. You've already authorized the banner program honoring the folks on the wall, and we would do bring all that to the culmination at the Veterans Day ceremony in November.
In which the 60th anniversary would be recognized.
Exactly.
On social media. Exactly. And I think I'll speak for myself, but certainly want to recognize the 10-year anniversary of the Veterans Memorial. But just that we're coming on the back end of such a big celebration, I agree with staff's recommendation on how to handle the 60-year anniversary, since we did something just so big. And certainly the 10-year anniversary of the Veterans Memorial is something that we want to recognize and celebrate and support. So thank you for your work on the recommendation.
And I think that's why we discussed it. We put the 60th if we can, not have this big celebration. And we're all here for the 75th.
Can't wait.
So you're young enough to be here. So we have a motion and a second.
Please vote. And motion passes unanimous.
At the memorial? At the memorial. Thought about doing one for the barn too. Did you do that? We have one at the park, we have one at the memorial. You remember where it is?
Point of order. Can we get back on the agenda,
No, I'm
please?
asking. What's that?
Can we just agendize that for later and get on with the agenda?
Yeah. All right, we'll agendize
about
that
it
for
after
later.
the meeting.
Okay. All right, moving on to public hearings. Order of presentation for public hearing items, staff report presentation, council questions of staff. 3, open public hearing. 3A, public comment. 4, closed public hearing. 5, council discussion and action. Moving on to item 6A, zone amendment 2023-06, City of Norco, a city-initiated amendment to Title 18, Chapter 18.2, definitions to clarify the definitions of hotels and motels to include the maximum stay of 30 consecutive days. Alma?
Yes. Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council, as Janet mentioned, this is agenda item 6A, and this is Zone Code Amendment 2023-06, and it's a proposed amendment to the Norco Municipal Code, Title 18, to amend the definitions for both hotels and motels to include the maximum stay of 30 consecutive days. So the verbiage that is proposed to be included was included in your resolution, and then basically it's that, to include a maximum 30-day stay. The Planning Commission did review this amendment and has recommended approval, and with that, staff will conclude and answer any questions that the council may have. And staff's recommendation is for approval, and I will conclude with that. Thank you.
Start with Councilwoman Grunmeyer. Any questions? Catherine?
No questions.
Do we have any public comments?
We have no public comments.
Some public comments. Council discussion and action.
Motion to approve. Second.
Please vote.
Yeah, Mr. Reed.
This is an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Norco, California, approving Zone Code Amendment 2023-06, a city-initiated amendment to Title 18, Chapter 18.02, definitions, to clarify the definitions of hotels and motels to include the maximum stay of 30 consecutive days.
Please vote. When you're on there, Berwin.
Good.
Councilmember Hunt. There we go. There you go.
All right, moving on to 6B, Zone Code Amendment 2023-07, City of Norco, a city-initiated amendment to Title 18, Chapter 18.13, Agricultural Low-Density A1 Zone to update to the provisions for large animal keeping and roosters, clarify the public nuisance and violations for excessive roosters and excessive animal units, and clarify general provisions / development standards. You again, Alma.
Yes. Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council, this is agenda item 6B, and this is a Zone Code Amendment 2023-07. So just, I'm going to summarize this. This amendment basically consists of three parts, three sections. So the first part of the amendment that's being proposed is an update to large animal keeping in the A1 zone. So what staff is recommending with this amendment is that the provision for animal units in the A1 zone be amended to allow for exotic animals such as camels, llamas, alpacas, and emus that are not native to the state, but that are commonly kept here in the city of Norco. And the reason for this is, yes, as I indicated, they're for example, camels. You can find camels, throughout the city. And the intent behind this code amendment is to facilitate enforcement and to protect the overall health, welfare, and safety of the community.
So staff is recommending that the camels, llamas, alpacas, and emus be included in the provision in the definitions for animal units in the A1 zone. So that's the first part. The second part of this amendment is that in order to increase the compatibility of roosters in the A1 zone, staff is recommending that the requirement for a conditional use permit where it currently starts at 25. Staff is recommending that the requirement for conditional use permit for roosters start at 17. So this is the purpose of this is to help facilitate enforcement and to increase the compatibility of roosters in the A1 zone. And the second part of that amendment is also to notate in the code that each violation, in other words, each number of rooster above what's permitted is a separate and independent violation. Not only that, but also with animal units, that each animal unit above the permitted, either conditionally permitted or permitted by right, is a separate and independent violation. And thirdly, probably back maybe in 2017 or something, the height limit in the A1 zone was accidentally removed. So the recommendation tonight is that it be incorporated back to the A1 zone, pretty much what it was before, to read the maximum height of any building shall be 2.5 stories or 35 feet, whichever is less. So in a nutshell, those are that's Zone Code Amendment 2023-07, and I've kind of summarized what it consists of. The Planning Commission has reviewed this proposed amendment, and their direction has been incorporated into the amendment that's being proposed to the City Council this evening. And with that, staff is recommending approval, and I can conclude and answer any questions that the council may have.
Yes, I'm looking in the ordinance, number 4. In the table, it includes an ostrich. And then letter I, and discusses the offspring that are not counted until they reach a certain age. And it was not, and we are allowing ostriches as emus. So ostrich should be there at 6 months. Okay, correct? I believe so, yes. Okay, yes. Okay, that was my only question, so I will move to make that change to make sure that ostrich is also included in the offspring. Thank you.
Councilwoman Primar? Councilman Hanna?
Yeah. Alma. Or Melvin, whichever one this, probably Melvin's one this pertains to. Do we have a lot of places now that have more than 16 roosters since
Yes, it's actually popping up, increasing more that I'm seeing, and even with our enforcement, as Michelle can tell you, it's kind of a slap on the wrist to some of these places. So they will come into compliance and stay there for a few months and then go back.
So they're coming back from like what there used to be, trying to come back to a big amount of them in town.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Welcome.
I have a question. So just on that rooster issue, are we mandated by the state where we can fine them?
Yes, but we also want to make sure our ordinance is strong enough so we can enforce that.
Is it?
It is okay, but right now it needs some work and it's a little outdated.
So,
Mayor, if I can clarify, I think what Melvin's suggesting, the clarifications we're making here are strengthening and addressing that issue. So the amounts of the administrative citations are set by the government code. What you're doing here today is making it extremely clear that if folks use it, or have something like a cockfighting operation or just have too many roosters, each and every rooster is a separate independent violation of the municipal code with its own separate and independent administrative fine. You have 25 roosters. Let's say we're at $1,000 a rooster, that's $25,000, not just $1,000 permit. So by providing that clarity that Melvin's proposing here, we are giving our ordinance effectively more teeth to deal with these illegal operations. So I think it's a great suggestion from folks here.
What about showbirds?
Hit our way too much.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to make sure we weren't going to come back to this. Any other questions? Public comments?
I have no public comment, Mayor.
Closing public comments, discussion and action.
So I'll make a motion to approve the ordinance with the addition of ostriches of 6 months of age to section 4I.
And just under discussion, thank you for the updates on the other animals, the miniature bovine and some of those things that weren't in the ordinance before. It's appreciated. So thank you. I will second.
Motion and second.
Title. This is an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Norco, California, approving Zone Code Amendment 2023-07, a city-initiated amendment to Title 18, Chapter 18.13, Agricultural Low-Density A1 Zones, update provisions for large animal keeping and roosters, to clarify the public nuisance and violations for excessive roosters and animal units, and to clarify general provisions, development standards in Chapter 18.13 A1 Zone.
Thanks, sir.
Please vote. And motion passes unanimous.
Moving on to 6C, Newcastle Sky Park Ridge LLC Industrial Project Development Agreement / Site Plan 2020-11. Modification number 1, Newcastle Sky Park Ridge LLC, a request for approval of a development agreement for the industrial project approved under Site Plan 2020-11, consisting of 6 buildings that total 80,066 square feet at 1004 Park Ridge Avenue, located within the industrial district of the Gateway Specific Plan. It's your big night tonight, huh, Alma?
Yeah, so I'm not going to repeat everything you said, so we'll make it short. So, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council, this is agenda item 6C, and this is a request for approval of a development agreement of an approval that was consisted of Site Plan 2020-11, consisting of an industrial project at 1004 Park Ridge Avenue. The development agreement would extend the approval. The approval that was given back in April of 2021 was for 2 years. The development agreement proposal is to extend that approval for 5 years, starting from October 2023. And with that, that extension of 5 years would include a public benefit contribution of $250,000 payable to the city in installments within 5 years, whether or not the project is built. So if the time runs out, they would have to pay the total amount regardless of whether or not the project is built. The Planning Commission did review this development agreement proposal and has recommended approval, and staff is recommending that the City Council approve the development agreement. And with that, I will conclude and answer any questions. Thank you.
Councilman Hanna, any questions? Councilman Newton?
Alma. Yeah, I had my mark and I misplaced it. When's the first payment? Is that tied to any submittal, or is it just a date certain?
Just a date certain, beginning, which would be this year. October of this year.
October.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilwoman Alma?
Yes. Alma, let's say they pull their building permits in a year and start their project. Are they required to pay the public benefit in full before pulling permits?
No. The way the development agreement is structured is that it would be payable in payments within 5 years. So whether or not they build a project, they still have to pay it. So do we have any leverage left over after they pull the building permit? Technically, yes, because there's still utilities that would have to be pulled. There's still the final. So, let's say that they're delayed on one of the payments, we would be able to say, okay, well, we're going to stop inspections or et cetera.
But technically, the way that the developer agreement is written right now, they could build and complete the entire project before paying the entire public benefit.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Grunmeyer? Any questions? Any public comments?
I have no public comment, Mayor.
Closing public comments, bringing it back to council for discussion and action.
So I'd like to amend the agreement to include language that would require them to pay the public benefit in its entirety before building the project to completion. So I'll make a motion with that change.
Right here, second.
I'll second that, but it's still under discussion. I agree with Catherine on that point, that Catherine, a little more, so that when the building permit is issued or at occupancy, or before occupancy,
When the building permit is issued,
that
before occupancy,
that the entire,
public benefit should be paid in full.
okay.
Is the motion and second clear?
So, yeah, so if the developer wants to build the project before the 5-year development agreement expires, that the public benefit would need to be paid in full before building permits are issued.
Can we still ask questions?
Yeah.
So how does this impact the negotiations that have taken place already, or how does that work?
Well, at this point, it would be a counteroffer. Council could approve for the first read of the ordinance, we would take it back to the developer and say, this is what was approved, are you okay with it? They say yes, we have a deal, and we'll bring it back to council for a second read. If they say no, we're back to the drawing board.
Second. Yeah, during public, she wants to do public comment.
Yeah, we already did that.
Yeah.
Member of public or?
And she's the applicant.
I'd actually like to hear. Yeah. Can I do that?
Yes.
Right.
For the record, nobody's left the room, so there's no due process issue in reopening the public hearing. We closed it.
Right, I'm reopening the public hearing just for you.
Yeah, thank you. Good evening, and thanks for your consideration this evening. I just wanted to clarify it in case it saves a second reading. I'm not sure if the point needs one already. Oh, yes. And my name's Courtney Wing. I'm with the applicant, owner, developer, Newcastle Partners. And I think if, for a point of clarification, we'd be fine to pay the balance due at time of development fees being due as well when you pull the building permit.
Thank you. So does your motion still stand? And
Yes.
Second still stands?
Yes.
No further discussion?
Mr. Mayor, can I read the title?
Yes.
This is an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Norco, California, approving the development agreement between the City of Norco and Newcastle Sky Parkridge LLC for the industrial project approved under Site Plan 2020-11, consisting of 6 buildings that total 80,066 square feet at 1004 Parkridge Avenue, located within the industrial district of the Gateway Specific Plan, Site Plan 2020-11, modification number 1.
Please vote.
Motion passes with Councilmember Grummeyer voting no.
Moving on to 7 city council and staff communications. City staff, do you have anything that you would like to communicate? Not hearing a peep. Lori? Nothing. Almy wants to say something else? You're done for the night, huh? All right. City attorney. Okay. All right. City manager, I already asked you. Robin? Catherine? Greg? Erwin? So I have 2 things, just 2 things. One, I would like to agendize, first off, I've been made aware that the new pizza place has applied for a karaoke license, and it turns out they need to have an entertainment license, and if any of you have ever seen karaoke, you know that's really not the case. But it's $3,200 or $3,700. So I would like to agendize somehow separating out karaoke from a band or something like that. I mean, it just seems kind of strange that it would cost that much money. At least have a discussion, maybe law enforcement. If somebody wants to weigh in, I'm not sure if there's something I'm not noticing, but it just seems like that license fee is pretty steep. Can I, for a second, just discuss it? Okay. Get that one out of business. And then sound. I'm a little bit concerned because there's over on well, quite a distance away from me on Fridays and Saturdays, there's 3 locations that are on Crestview in California, and I can hear them all the way to Pedley Avenue, and they're quite loud. I see Amanda shaking her head, but one of them's right by you. And I get quite a few calls, and I'm just wondering if there's an enforcement issue, or how do we deal with that? It's the same ones over and over again.
Yeah, Mayor, so this is something that we at the staff level have been discussing off and on for a number of months in terms of improving what we can do to strengthen our ordinances to allow to deal with some of these nuisance properties where we have repeat folks having parties over and over and over and over. We had a little traction when Lieutenant Francis was here, but we've got Lieutenant Hall here now, so that's something we can definitely revisit. We just need to try to find some better ways. I know Colin had some ideas. We just haven't got anything to put over the finish line for you. But maybe we can agendize this for a future discussion and get your ideas. But maybe give us a few weeks to, maybe we can bring this, say, in March, so give us a little time to do some research and see what there might be out there. It's a hard one to manage. So we want to, if we're going to make ordinance updates, we want them to be worthwhile. I mean, that really will have some teeth and that will change folks' behaviors, hopefully.
As I understand, the fines are pretty hefty, and it's like cost of doing business. These are
Right.
paid parties.
And yeah, that's what I've understood from some of our officers, that they've been told by the folks running the event that they're happy to pay, you know, $1,000 fine 3 times that evening, and that's fine with them. So that's not effective, and it's a drain on resources for law enforcement. So we got to try to figure out what we can do, if anything, but what could we do to make this even more difficult for folks who just don't want to be a good neighbor, right? Most people want to be a good neighbor, but we have a few who apparently do not. It is. The challenge is those administrative fines are set by are maxed at the government code. But we'll look into it and see there are certain kinds, like you adjusted, for example, administrative fines for building code violations because we learned that we could actually go higher on those. And I think one of those is as much as $5,000. So, but we need to see if there's anything with noise that we can do to make this have more teeth. So. Yeah, we're actually not allowed to. Yeah, we're not allowed to set, that might have been at the time, but now those administrative fines are set by the government code. We have limits on what they can be at the top end.
Maybe the government ought to move in beside one of them when they're playing that horn.
Agreed. Agreed.
All right, that's all I
So,
have.
I have a motion, and I need a second for that one.
No second. Oh, you did second.
For that one?
Oh, for
The
Sound
noise.
issues. Noise issues.
Seconded.
I'll second. But not till March.
So we're going to vote, and it looks like you turned off your. Okay. I can call the vote. Councilmember Hannah? Was that a yes? Okay. Councilmember Alleman?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Newton? Motion passes unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you all. We're adjourned.